5th, 2021 San Jose Charter Review Commission meeting, and I'm going to call this to order and ask that the clerk take the roll.
Hi, before Megan starts the roll, I would like everybody who's a member of the commission to unmute now. It'll make going through the roll a lot quicker if everybody's pre-unmuted. Go ahead, Megan.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, so first we have Barbara Marshman.
Here.
Christina Johnson.
Here.
Dan Bizzuto. He's absent. Elizabeth Monley.
Here.
Ellie Matsumura. I think you're connecting to audio. Ellie Matsumura.
Sorry, yes, here I am.
No problem. Enrico Calendar.
Good evening.
Frank Maitsky. Frank Maitsky. Okay. Garrick Percival.
Here.
Thank you. George Sanchez.
Present.
Hui Tran.
Here.
Jeremy Bruce. Jeremy Bruce. Okay. Jose Posadas.
Here.
Lund Diep. I believe he's absent. Linda Lizotte.
I'm here. Mr. Chair, before the meeting gets started, I'd like to make a comment after the roll call is taken, please.
Okay. Luis Barrocio.
Here.
Thank you. Magnolia Siegel.
Present.
Thank you. Maria Fuentes.
Here.
Sammy Robledo.
Here.
Sherry Segura. I believe she's absent. T. Tran.
Present.
Thank you. Veronica Amador.
Here.
Yong Zhao.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, and then I'll call Dan Bizzuto one more time. And Frank Maitsky. Jeremy Bruce. Lund Diep. And Sherry Segura. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Lizotte. Thank you. Commissioner Lizotte?
Yes, thank you. I'm making this comment on behalf of myself and maybe some other commissioners as well as the public. I was at a meeting from 3 o'clock until about 10 minutes before this meeting started. And I understand that some items were sent to us around 4 or 4:30. I think we need a rule that any documents that want to be heard by this commission have to get to us within 24 hours of this meeting. You know, I'm not anywhere near a printer. I haven't had the opportunity because I was in a meeting to read those documents. And, you know, it looks like it's letters from the public, letters from one of our committee members, something additional from civic makers. It's just impossible to you know, stay up with everything if we're getting materials at the last minute, and it's disingenuous to the public. You know, we have to have it out on the website and to us within 24 hours of this meeting if it's going to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lizotte. I totally would agree with you, and we'll do our best to be able to get things out in a more timely way. We can't do anything about letters to the public, but that's something that we just will post when we get them, just because we can't make that. But our commission materials, we should be able to do that. And I hear you, and I apologize for the late notice of materials this week. I'd now like to, so we established a quorum. Speaking of which, could I get a motion to accept and receive and file the letters from the public that we received this week, over these 2 weeks? Motion by Magnolia, second. Thank you, Commissioner Fuentes, and the roll call, please.
Okay, and then again, could we have everyone unmute to start, please? Okay, and then I'll begin with Barbara Marshman.
Yes.
Christina Johnson,
Yes.
Dan Bizzuto's absent, Elizabeth Monley,
I haven't had a chance to read them. We're accepting them as just, I've seen that there are attachments, letters from the public, but I haven't read them.
We are receiving them and filing them. is
Okay,
what our motion is.
then yes.
thank you. Ellie Matsumura,
Yes.
Enrico Calendar,
Aye.
and then I'll just call everyone who's absent one more time, just to make sure. Frank Maidsky, Garrick Percival,
Yes.
George Sanchez,
Yes.
Hui Tran,
Yes.
Jeremy Bruce, I believe is absent. Jose Posadas,
Yes.
Lynn Diep, I believe is absent. Linda Lazat,
No.
Luis Barrocio,
Aye.
Magnolia Siegel,
Yes.
Maria Fuentes.
Yes.
Sorry, was it a yes?
Yes.
Thank you. Sammy Robledo,
Yes.
Sherry Segura, I believe is absent. T. Tran,
Yes.
Veronica Amador,
Yes.
and Yong Zhao.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And could I now get a motion on item number 3, which is the consent calendar? The motion is to get a motion to approve the minutes of the March 22nd, 2021 commission meeting. That's the only piece that's on the consent calendar for the approval. Can I get a motion to approve the consent calendar? Commissioner Segal, a second? Commissioner Marshman, thank you. Could I take the roll, please?
Yes. So confirmed that Lon and Sherry are absent for the entire meeting, so I'll skip them now. We'll start off with Barbara Marshman.
Yes.
Thank you. Christina Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you. Dan is absent. Elizabeth Monley.
Yes.
Thank you. Ellie Matsumura.
I'm sorry, I did have a clarification question on the minutes. For item 3B, the action says, upon motion by Commissioner Calendar and seconded by Commissioner Baruch, Commission moved to adopt a draft letter, and then it says the chair noted he and staff will begin the research in order to save time should this request move to council. Was that, I think that was research on project cost?
Yes. Remember, we,
Okay, well, I mean,
Go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
we were going over what the possibilities were, so that's what I've been working on.
Wonderful. Is it possible to get clarification in the minutes and just say research on project cost?
Sure.
Thank you. With that, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a note of that. Okay. Enrico Calendar.
I had a quick point of clarification. We were supposed to be having reconsideration of last minutes, or were those adopted with the changes, Mr. Chairman?
They were adopted with the changes.
Okay, so aye.
Frank is absent. Garrick Percival.
Yes.
George Sanchez.
Yes.
Hui Tran.
Yes.
Jeremy Baruch is absent. Jose Posadas.
Yes.
Linda Lazat.
Yes.
Luis Barrocio.
Yes.
Magnolia Siegel.
With the corrections noted by Commissioner Matsumura, yes.
Maria Fuentes.
I'm abstaining since I was absent at that meeting.
Sammy Robledo.
Yes.
T. Tran.
Yes.
Veronica Amador.
Yes.
And Yong Zhao.
Yes.
Thank you. So that motion passes.
Thank you, Megan. And thank you everyone for your patience in getting through so many roll call votes to start our meeting off. Let's get started then. I want to do my report from the chair. I just have 2 items tonight. First of all, I did sign and send the letter that you authorized to the mayor and council requesting additional support, financial support for the different items that we had listed in the letter. So that letter has been sent. The research that I have been doing and working with staff and our consultants will come in our report back. Tony and Mark and Lawrence will refer to those items in terms of what did we find out. We also have a memo now from Commissioner Matsumura. So we'll do that report during old business, but just to keep you updated on those pieces. The second thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was through one of our commissioners' recommendations, the GARE report was sent to you. I'd ask you to read through that. It's not a heavy read. It's kind of long, but you'll see it's kind of divided. When I went through the toolkit, it's a toolkit that's being used by cities, municipalities around studying equity questions, equity issues, especially when they're looking at things like charter reviews. And I thought that the questions that were asked in terms of how you evaluate a recommendation through an equity lens, I thought were really well done. And I don't think they would in any way kind of delay or make it too cumbersome, because I want to get efficiency and effectiveness in the recommendations that we make. But I'd ask you to kind of read through that document, that toolkit, to see do we have a consensus around looking at those the kind of the questions that they're looking at when they're looking at evaluating recommendations, and when appropriate, maybe that's the consensus discussion we can have around them and looking at this, taking that set of questions. So at this point, I'm just asking folks to read through that toolkit. When we get to the recommendations portion in phase 2, I'm going to suggest that we use something similar, if not edited, if not that version, to be able to look at that. So I've just asked folks to take a look at that toolkit that you got at our last meeting. And now I'd like to ask for the report from the clerk.
Let me open my camera. The only report I really have is that we have another intern coming. Her official first day will be next Monday, because we still get our interns fingerprinted as if they're regular employees. So it takes time to get the fingerprinting done. So she'll be starting on Monday. She is a grad student going for her MPA. She's really loves research. She's the first task we told her to do is to read the research report from 1985. We're like, just start with this research report so you could see the kind of things that we're going to be talking about in this commission. So she's very excited to get started with projects for you guys. So that's my big announcement, and Fred already talked about the letter.
Thank you, Tony. And then Lawrence, I don't think you had a report out, correct?
Nope.
Okay, awesome. Don't go far, Lawrence. We're gonna get started right now. This evening, we are I've moved the agenda to do new business before old business, because old business will always be the direction of the commission around how do we affect the work plan. So it doesn't make any sense for us to talk about the work plan first and then have the study session and then be like, okay, what are we we want to take actions on that, but we already talked about the work plan. So last time I used the orders of the day to make the change. This time I just rescheduled it so that I think if we have our study session first, get time for your questions, your thoughts, and then we go back to the work plan. Lawrence will do a summary of the work plan tonight, just in terms of the changes that we made by your direction from last time, and then any actions or motions that you want to take up tonight, having learned what we've learned, and move forward. Tonight we have a number of different parts to our presentation. Again, we're in the first phase of the study session, so what we're trying to do is get a common knowledge, a common understanding of the questions before us. I'm hoping that tonight's piece is directly answering questions that you asked earlier on, as after Lawrence went through kind of Charters 101, everyone was very clear about, yeah, but now we need to know what San Jose does. And after Professor Johnson's talk last time, I think this question comes back around again. Yes, but what about San Jose? What we're trying to do is just be able to study the state of the art and then move it towards the specifics of San Jose. And that's one of the things that we're going to be focusing on tonight. We've had a few glitches in our one guest, former city manager Fagoni, had a personal emergency in her family, so she can't join us tonight, but we have a great replacement coming in, and I appreciate him dearly for being able to do that for us. So Lawrence will talk about that in a second. But first, we're going to really understand another kind of Charter 101, but start to flesh out what the San Jose piece of this is. And we'll continue to build this model out as we move forward. But tonight, hopefully we'll move closer to the San Jose piece. And then we'll have our guests and have time for questions and discussion. And then we will be able to alter our work plan or take actions or motions that are appropriate after you've had the study session. And so I'm going to turn it over to Lawrence now and start in with our presentation for this evening. Lawrence?
I see Tony has a hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick announcement that we're having some issues with streaming the meeting on YouTube and Granicus. YouTube is up with no captioning, and the Granicus live stream, which is from our website, is not up. People can watch through Zoom and they can watch on YouTube, but there is no captioning. So I thought there might be attendees who will note that, and we know, and Craig is working on the problem to get it fixed.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And thank you, Chair. So what we have planned here is about an hour and 15 minutes of short presentation, digging into some sections of the charter that you all wanted to dive into. I'm hoping that sets the stage for some reflections from former Mayor Ron Gonzalez and former City Manager of San Jose, Norberto Duenas. As mentioned, we did get a notification last night from Deborah Fagoni that she had a family medical emergency, so she was not able to attend today. Also want to apologize about the work plan going out late. When we get to that section, I'll walk you through the changes, but I've been hustling as much as I can to get as many speakers confirmed for that upcoming work plan, and only got confirmation basically late on Friday for speakers from the Office of Racial Equity in San Jose. So doing our best to get you materials for the meeting. The work plan is the only item you received today that's germane for tonight's meeting. The rest of the information, we're just trying to share information that's requested. There was a memo that Professor Christensen shared updating his prior memo about community engagement efforts of past charter review commissions. Professor Christensen is going to be joining us at our next commission meeting to talk about district elections and election timing. So he's very invested in your work, and he shared that with us today. And then I shared information about the City of Austin that was requested last week. There is more information to come that we will get to you as we can. Some of the citations that were spoken about by Professor Nelson, working with Commissioner Percival from San Jose State to get those to you. We'll get those to you when we can. As Chair Ferrer mentioned, we're providing this to you. It's optional. It's not required. We will do our best to get you and distinguish which materials are for meetings particularly and which need to be posted. So thank you, and thank you for your patience. So with that, what I'd like to do, Megan and Tony, Norberto Duenas and Ron Gonzalez are on the Zoom meeting with us right now. I see waving a hand, and thank you for joining us. I'm just going to walk through this presentation and share my screen, and then we'll turn it over to the two of you to share some reflections, and then have plenty of times for questions from all of you for Mr. Duenas and Mr. Gonzalez. So hold the questions, and we'll jump right in. And here is my screen and let me, okay. Does that work for folks? Is that big enough for folks to see?
Yeah, put it on present.
Yes.
Let's try present. I'm gonna stop because when I do presenter view, it covers my whole screen. So I want to try something different here. Present from the beginning. That doesn't work. What I'd like to be able to do is present speaker view. Here we go. Okay. Thanks for your patience. Here we go. All right. So in addition, which you should have received last Friday, there was an update to the chart of comparing governance models that included a new column for San Jose after our conversation with Professor Nelson 2 weeks ago. And we'll walk through that briefly, and then we'll talk about these sections, Articles 4, 5, 8, 9, and 10, which lay out a lot of the especially those first two buckets of your deliberation, the form of governance, council manager versus mayor council, as well as timing of elections. And all of this obviously has potential implications for the third bucket of accountability and inclusion and transparency, equity, the broad third bucket, which we were trying to grapple with. So I will just jump in here and remind you of the mayor council. For the council manager is the form of governance for San Jose. There are 10 council members elected by district and the mayor elected at large, 4-year terms, and there's a limit for mayor and council to 2 successive terms. And the city manager is the chief administrative officer, presents the annual budget, and the mayor proposes the candidate for the manager subject to council approval. And we'll learn more about the sections of the charter that actually map this out, but the council directly appoints a handful of departments, including the city department heads, including city attorney, city auditor, city clerk, and independent police auditor. So this is, as requested, some of the details of how San Jose pans out according to mayor, council, and council manager. There are some specifics, but this hews very closely to the council manager form. We heard from Professor Nelson that there are very few actual true hybrids, and her perspective was that San Jose is mostly a council manager city. Let's see if anything here that it's very, very close as far as if you look at the council manager column and the San Jose column. I think to point out the mayor has no veto. The council appoints advisory boards, and added the specifics on the appointment and removal of department heads. As mentioned, council appoints a few, mayor appoints the PIO, and the manager appoints all others. But this is here for your reference, and I just wanted to, we can always add to this as there's more information that's necessary. Commissioner Marshman.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The one thing that my recollection of working with many mayors, including Ron, is that the 1985 charter review made what was then considered a significant change in the power of San Jose's mayor that's not reflected in this, and it may just not be important anymore, but the mayor of San Jose now does the initial budget memo, the initial budget presentation, basically prepares the budget plan. The city council has to adopt it, and sometimes there's some debate, and sometimes if the mayor does the work enough ahead of time, there is not a lot of debate, but the mayor has a budget staff and now presents the budget. And after that, the city manager does the detail based on that, the mayor and council's direction. I don't see that reflected here.
Yeah, and let's let's hold that question for Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Duenas. Any additional questions we want to take here? I do want to avoid discussion or getting into answering questions, but Commissioner Lazat, you're mute.
I just wanted to agree with Barbara, and I was going to raise that, having
Okay,
been a council member in San Jose.
Okay, great. Like I said, we'll update this and continue to provide this as a reference. So let's get into the Charter Commission sections that actually map out those specifics, those particulars. Article 4 talks about the council. What I tried to do in this presentation was pull the specifics of the clauses for each article that pertain to the directive of this commission. Composition of council, mayor elected a regular municipal election from city at large, and council elected by district, which we talked about earlier. And then elections by district happen no later than February 1st in the year following the decennial census. The council shall appoint an advisory commission whose purpose shall be to study and make appropriate recommendations with respect to such redistricting. There is, as you all know, a redistricting commission that's been established and is doing that work right now after the most recent decennial census. There's a request to review clause 411 from Article 4, and that is the council interference with administrative matters. Highlighted in yellow here, the fact that neither council nor any of his mayor, nor the mayor, council nor any of his members, nor the mayor shall interfere with the execution by the city manager of his or her powers and duties, nor in any manner dictate the appointment or removal of any city officer or employees whom the city manager is empowered to appoint. And we'll see that distinction as far as which department heads the city manager has purview over and which the council does. Skipping down to the next paragraph that lays that out, the council has the ability to oversee and approve heads, the following officers or department heads: city manager, city attorney, city auditor, independent police auditor, and city clerk. And this sets a pretty clear line that the council nor any of its members nor the mayor shall give orders to subordinates. So basically all communication has to go through these department heads. This was interesting for me. Policy objectives, statement of policy with broad goals, objectives, and aspirations for each city department shall be adopted, a written policy by the council and under the administration of the city manager. That's that clause A there. And clause B says, when a department head position becomes vacant, the council shall review and amend the previously approved statement of policy and adopt a set of questions for prospective appointees concerning the goals, objectives, and aspirations. So the statement of policy that dictates the aspirations and objectives for each department is something I think that it's helpful for this commission to know about. And then also the moment of vacancy of a department head, the set of questions that dictate the selection or can dictate the selection of subsequent department heads. And then prior to appointing any department head, the city manager shall submit responses from proposed appointees to the council for its review and shall seek council's advice or consent. So council has to see the responses that have been submitted by the city manager's proposed department heads. This does not apply to the appointment of acting department heads. So just a little bit of opportunity there for, I felt like to me something that the commission would be good for you all to know about the particulars of how that works. I thought I would highlight the citizen participation clause. Doesn't say too much, but basically no person shall be denied the right personally or through authorized representatives to present grievances or offer suggestions for the betterment of municipal affairs at any regular meeting of the council. So everyone has to have the opportunity to speak, which we have seen at our own commission meetings. Moving on to Article 5, the mayor. Powers and duties and the clauses here that I pulled out. This is not all of them. You'll see that there's A, D, E, G, and H. But the mayor shall have the power to make recommendations to the council on matters of policy and program, which require council decision. If the mayor recommends any increases in city budget, shall recommend the method of finance, and likewise for the curtailment of services, dictate or specify the specific recommendations and reasons for the proposal. Mayor shall preside at meetings of the council and have a vote as a member of the council with no veto. Mayor shall have the power to direct and supervise the PIO. That's the one department head that the mayor appoints and department that the mayor oversees. And the mayor shall exercise such other powers and perform such other duties as may be prescribed by the council, provided that they're the same and not inconsistent with this charter. So the council has the ability to prescribe additional powers for the mayor as long as they're not in conflict with this charter. Article 8, administrative organization. This Clause 800 talks about the council establishing new city offices, departments, and agencies and prescribing their functions, powers, and duties. This is for creating new offices, department, agencies. The second bullet there under 800A, Clause 800A says the council may at any time prescribe additional functions, powers, or duties, or take away, reduce, or otherwise change the functions, powers, or duties of any office, department, or agency. Likewise, the council may at any time abolish or discontinue any office, department, or agency other than those established by this charter. So I read this to mean, and this might be a topic of conversation with our guest speakers, that the council can change the responsibilities and functions and powers and duties of any agency, but cannot abolish the office, department, or agency that are established by this charter, which are police, fire, public works, parks and recreation, personnel, planning, airport, and library. So the charter explicitly establishes those departments, and council cannot abolish them by writ of this charter. The council, this 800B clause says council may contract with public and private agencies, but in that contracting with other agencies, no powers, duties, or functions assigned to the office of city clerk, city attorney, city auditor, or independent police auditor, or finance department shall be discontinued, assigned, or transferred to anyone else aside from those departments. So again, a little bit of a prescription of how the work of those particular departments happens, and limits on how that power can be shifted. Article 8 and section clause 801, direction by the city manager, except as otherwise provided elsewhere in this charter, all offices, departments, and agencies established by or pursuant to the provisions of this article shall be administered by an officer appointed by and subject to the direction and the supervision of the city manager. This is the city manager's power to appoint department heads outside of those that we just saw. Those are the I should know them at this point, but city manager, city attorney, city auditor, independent police auditor, or city clerk. So 801 says that the city manager can appoint department heads outside of those other departments. 805, the city auditor. Thought this might be interesting for the commission to be aware of. The powers and duties of the city auditor: conduct or cause to be conducted annual post audits of all the fiscal transactions and accounts kept by or for the city, conduct performance audits as assigned by council, and conduct special audits and investigations as assigned by council. And the city auditor's office itself has a performance audit, which shall be done through a contract with an independent audit firm, with no other contracts to the city at least every 2 years. This is the clause 807A that establishes police, fire, public works, parks and rec, personnel department, planning department, airport, and library, and reinforces the council's power to create additional departments and also prescribe the functions, powers, and duties thereof. And 808 talks about the public information office that is established and administered by a public information officer appointed by the mayor. The specific duties of that office are to gather and disseminate to the public and media timely, accurate, and complete information concerning the policies of the council and other information regarding the city. All right, 809 talks about Office of the Independent Police Auditor. Independent appointed by council for a 4-year term, or in the event of a vacancy, the remainder of the incumbent's term. The council may remove an incumbent with an affirmative vote of 10 members for the reasons of misconduct, inefficiency, incompetence, inability, or failure to perform duties, or negligence in performance of duties. And council must provide reasons in writing and provide the incumbent an opportunity to respond before council. Powers and duties of the independent police auditor include review police department investigations of complaints against police officers to determine if the investigation was complete, thorough, objective, and fair. Make recommendations with regard to police department policies and procedures based on the independent police auditor's review of investigations of complaints against police officers, and conduct public outreach to educate the community on the role of the independent police auditor and to assist the community with the process and procedures for investigation of complaints against police officers. Article 9 gets into officers and employees. 900 enumerates the officers, lists the officers of the city: mayor, council, city manager, city attorney, city clerk, city auditor, independent police auditor, directors of departments or offices, members of various boards and commissions, and other officers in charter or by action of council. 901 lays out appointment and removal of officers and employees. Council shall appoint and remove city manager, as we've heard a few times now, city attorney, city clerk, city auditor, independent police auditor, as well as acting. All other officers, department heads, and employees of the city, except members of boards and commissions, shall be appointed by the city manager. So city manager, again, has the purview over appointment or removal of department heads outside of those listed in the first bullet point in section 901. The mayor and council members have the ability to appoint assistants to serve in their offices, and the city manager appoints heads of departments and offices other than city clerk. So there's some redundancy here. Hopefully you're picking up a theme. There are certain offices and departments, heads of which council appoints, and the rest city manager has purview. Just for completeness sake, this is some other clauses that are fairly rote. Article 10, boards and commission. The charter does lay out the planning commission with the following powers and duties: making recommendations to the council respecting the adoption, amendment, or repeal of master, comprehensive, precise, or specific plans for the physical development of the city, and periodically to review those specific plans for future physical development of the city. Making recommendations to the council about the adoption, amendment, or repeal of land use and development regulations. I see a typo there. Apologies for that. Including zoning and subdivision regulations. Make recommendations, clause C there, respecting the adoption, amendment, or repeal of plans or programs for redevelopment, rehabilitation, renewal of areas of the city. Make recommendations respecting capital improvement programs, and finally exercise such other powers and perform such other functions expressly given to it by this charter or by council, as long as they're not inconsistent with the provisions of this charter. Other boards and commissions, this is basically gives the council the ability to create other boards and commissions and grant them functions, powers, and duties. The second bullet says council can create temporary committees as it may deem advisable to render counsel and advice to the council, city manager, or any other board and commission. And then the last bullet point says that boards, commissions, and committees created by council shall be subject to direction and supervision of the council, and members thereof shall be appointed to the council or by the mayor if authorized by council. The council will set the terms. So that's how boards and commissions are laid out in the charter. And that's all we have as far as the specifics. I realize that's a lot, but my hope is that this at least starts to create a common language this might very well, I know it is review for a lot of you. For some of you, you're seeing this for the first time. So want to make sure that there is basically common language understanding of the mechanics of the charter as it relates to some of the clauses that you all spoke of as far as an interest in this commission's work. And we'll use this as the basis for, I think, some of the questions, hopefully for our guests. Commissioner Fuentes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Lawrence, for this, great summary taken from the charter to help us understand various roles and responsibilities and powers. And I'm not sure about other commissioners, but I find this very helpful. And what I would like to know is what I think would be helpful for me, and I don't know how other commissioners think, but what I need, because we're going to have one of our major questions we're going to need to address is the power of the mayor. And I'm going to need the same information that has been presented today from the charter, but organize these specifics or these details, but organized by the powers, responsibilities, and duties of the mayor, the city manager, and the council. Because I know for myself, I need that clarity to fully understand, okay, as of today, what are the duties, the powers and the duties of each one? And then as we continue looking at the question and moving forward with other information, I think we have a tool, a framework from which to really analyze what's going on. And I would like to see if other commissioners would find that helpful, because I'm not going to ask for this as one person, but I really want to know if others need this, because I can tell you right now, the way I'm thinking about this is I'm going to need that tool. I'm going to need this information organized by the mayor, the city council, the city manager, who has the power, who has responsibilities and duties in the various areas. This overview is extremely helpful. I think this particular chart is helpful, but it doesn't give us a detail to fully understand. And I think it's important for us to have that detail in order to make any recommendations or decisions toward recommendations for the question at hand. And I don't know, earlier we were informed that, we have interns that are supporting us. This could be a project for an intern or however else, it's managed to have it done. But I think it's really essential to have that detail.
Commissioner Fuentes, I appreciate your thoughts and comments. And when we get to our next item after our guests, those are the exact kind of conversations and suggestions that I'm going to ask for. So I'm just going to ask that we hold it till later, but
Okay.
definitely expanding on what people need to know. Commissioner Tran?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify the presentation, because this was actually very helpful. And I'm looking at the creation of the Office of Racial Equity as an example here.
Yep.
So the ORE was created by direction of the council. However, in terms of, and aside from setting the charter or the mission of the ORE, does the council now have any ability to direct the work of the Office of Racial Equity?
Only through communication with the department head, or the office, director of the office. So the city manager appoints the I think in this case, director might be better rather than department head. It's director of the office. Excuse me if I'm not getting the terminology right. But basically, the communication and flow of policy direction happens through the city manager. The council creates the policy, creates the direction, shares with the city manager takes it to staff, including department heads, to implement. So I think that's a great question for practicalities of exactly why we have our guest speakers here. So let's bring that question back up. as our first question for our guest speakers.
Sure.
So with that, I would like for us to shift gears here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to ask our first guest, Norberto Dueñas, to share a brief bio of himself as a former city manager and share his perspective on the practicalities of governing under the council manager form based on his time in the city of San Jose.
Well, following the council manager form of government, I would prefer that former Mayor Gonzalez start the conversation. And former mayor is always before former city manager.
All right. Well, we'll call an audible then. Former Mayor Gonzalez, would you do us the honor of starting?
Well, thank you, Norberto. But we have a bit of a hybrid government here in San Jose, so I'm not sure. Maybe we'll just flip a coin and say I won the toss. Well, first of all, thank you, Chair Ferrer and commissioners, for this opportunity to have a conversation with you. First, a disclaimer. Please remember that it's been 15 years since I left the mayor's office. So if my memory isn't the sharpest, it's because, quite frankly, I've tried not to think about running the city of San Jose for 15 years. You know, it's one of those situations where what I thought I would do first is just give you my background as a publicly elected person, because it is rather unique. I served in public office for a total of 24 years, and that began in 1979. I was born in San Francisco, but raised in Sunnyvale, and I was elected to the Sunnyvale City Council in 1979, and that is definitely a purebred council manager form of government. 7 city council members at that time elected citywide. Of course, a lot of cities now have gone to districts. And very common in those days for the council manager form of government for the council to choose the mayor. In that time period, 1979 to about the end of 1986, the city council chose the mayor on an annual basis. And I was chosen by my colleagues on the city council in Sunnyvale to serve as mayor 2 times. I then, and each office, by the way, I've held is similar to San Jose, 2-term limit, so a maximum of 8 years. I then served on the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, and of course, a very different type of government, very different areas of responsibility. 5 members on that city on that Board of Supervisors, as they are now. The district I served then from 1989 to the end of 1996 is the same district that Supervisor Otto Lee now currently serves. So about half of Sunnyvale, all of Peters, the Berryessa neighborhood, and then all the way down to the Evergreen neighborhood. And then in November 1998, I was elected to be mayor of San Jose. Began my term in January of 1999, and then left office in the December of 2006. So, having served in Sunnyvale, a purebred council manager form of government, in the city of Sunnyvale, even to this day, and other cities like Sunnyvale, it's a part-time type of I call it almost like a hobby. You maintain a full-time job so that you can, pay for your rent and keep a roof over your head, which I did. And since that time, the city council has now changed to district elections. And just last November, for the first time in the city's history, the citizens of Sunnyvale picked their mayor. So that's a big change in the city of Sunnyvale. City of San Jose is a little, I would disagree with, I think you mentioned Lawrence, a professor who said that San Jose wasn't a hybrid. I would disagree with that slightly because of what Barbara Marshman mentioned and former council member Linda Lazat supported, and that's the notion that, in my opinion, one of the biggest powers the mayor of San Jose has is the budget, is the purse strings. And in some respects, I don't know if the schedule is the same as it was when I was mayor, but it's somewhat similar to the way the governor of California presents his first or her first budget package or recommendations. That's usually, I think, in the March timeframe. And then the city manager goes to work and he fine tunes it and makes recommendations. And then the mayor I would come out with what was called then the May budget revision, which was my original budget with various revisions based on input from the city manager and all the department heads and council members and so forth. And then the council would have numerous public hearings and then eventually approve the budget. And I still think it's the case. We would have to have our budget approved by the end of July by state law. I would say the other thing that's different with, I noticed you guys are calling it the mayor council form of government. It's probably more commonly known as a strong mayor form of government. I know that's been an issue that's been debated in San Jose several times over the last 10 years. Is that it's not common in a mayor council form of government for the mayor to actually attend the city council meetings. It's usually the case where the council will have a president, like the board president in San Francisco, the board of supervisors, or in Oakland, I believe they have a president also. So it's not common for the mayor to attend the meetings or to manage the meetings, which is the direct opposite here in, of course, here in San Jose. So there are some subtle changes and subtle differences. I would say that the budget power is a very strong one. Let's face it. I mean, it comes down to where you're going to spend your money and what are the priorities. And certainly that was something that we took a lot of care in to make sure that we were meeting all the needs of the 10 council districts as expressed by the council members. During my time as mayor, I had the opportunity to serve with 3 city managers. Deb Fagoni was the interim when I first began office. Then the city council hired Del Borgsdorf and then Les White. I never had the chance to work with Norberto as a city manager. He was in the organization, but he hadn't worked his way up to the city manager's office, but I wish I would have had that opportunity. He's a great guy. So other than that, I'll save the rest of the time for questions from the commissioners because I think that's what's important for us to address tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to clarify, we are trying to, at the request of commissioners, trying to use the council manager terminology rather than strong mayor, weak
Right.
mayor, and mayor council rather than strong mayor. So we might consider, based on some of what I've read, San Jose to be a council manager with enhanced mayor powers, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so
that's why I said it's a hybrid. It's kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, right. Great. So thank you. We'll get to some questions in a minute. Mr. Duenas, love to hear from you next.
Good, thank you, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm glad I was able to pinch hit for you tonight. Deb had an emergency. So again, Roberto Duenas, 33 years with the city of San Jose. Started my career as a council intern back in 1985. I believe you may have a report on a city charter review that I was able to work on many years ago on an Apple IIc and an image writer printer. Many of you may not even remember what that is, but joined the city as a council assistant, then also moved on to work for Mayor Susan Hammer for 4 years after working 6 years with Councilmember Jim Bell. So on the budget message front, spent a lot of time putting together and helping put together budget messages, and I'd like to go back to that in a little bit. And then had about 5 different chapters in the city of San Jose with different departments: housing, redevelopment, eventually as a deputy city manager, and then as a city manager for about, if you look at the entire period of time, was for about 3 years, the last 3 years of my career. So that's my background, and been in San Jose since 1979, San Jose State University, poli-sci, and public administration. So getting to the to the conversation, I do agree wholeheartedly with Ron and others that may have expressed this, that the city of San Jose is a hybrid. if you look at it purely from a city manager, the traditional city manager type of structure, the elements that you have in San Jose are not part of that traditional city manager structure. And I think it's really important to understand how that came about. And so I would just like to echo on the importance of making sure, and I know you'll do this, but it's very important to kind of carve out what Measure J, I believe it was, did for the city of San Jose at that time, and make sure that you understand the different components. Because I even think that the creation of the city auditor and the function of doing performance audits may have come from that charter change. So it not only did some changes to the budget responsibilities of the city manager, but other certain responsibilities to make the organization more accountable and hopefully more efficient. So I would like to stress that the importance of you to be able to look at Measure J. And then Measure J, a lot of people still talk about this, was a result of a shock that the organization went through back in probably in the early 80s, as it was referred to as the $60 million bond loss. And that started really the creation of this Charter Review Commission and a push by the mayor and the council to try to create a little bit more accountability on the policy side, some adjustments. So I think those changes, are important to highlight. And then the other point I would make, and I think Maria made this, the importance of really knowing those duties and responsibilities from everybody else. Because I think the question I've asked myself, and I haven't spent much time following this issue, is, what is it that we're trying to fix? Or what is it that we're trying to make adjustments to, and why? And I think understanding the adjustments that we've made in the past, given the shock to the organization, I think would be helpful and to the commission. And just jumping in pretty much in the budget process, Ron, you got it almost right. And I think this is important too, before I forget this thought. I think it's really important for the commission to understand, is the current mayor and council utilizing all its duties, all its functions as best as possible in terms of either responsibilities or sharing of power, etc. And the reason why I ask that is because when the charter change came into play in '85, Tom McHenry was the first mayor to implement the budget powers. And I remember during Susan Hammer also, we didn't have just 2 budget messages, we had 4 budget messages. The mayor really took that ability, that power that was given to him by the charter, to do a November message, to talk about fiscal calculations, revenues and expenditures. Then they did the March message, that's the one that Ron was talking about, and a critical component because it does lay out the policy direction to the city manager to say, these are the areas, these are the programs, these are the things that I want you to do with the council's approval as you developed your May 1 budget. And the other thing I believe that happened with Measure J is that I think the date of the release of the city manager's budget to May 1st was also approved, which is extremely important because the council felt that the community and the council needed more time to review the proposed budget. And then to Ron's point, the revision came in June, and it was the June budget modifications message. After the mayor has incorporated all the comments from the council, all the public hearings, all the meetings, then the mayor puts all that together, and in a budget modification memo comes in with a variety of different recommendations. So I think we can't underestimate the importance of that particular responsibility that was a major shift as part of Measure J. And once again, I also think that it's important to understand the changes that were made also in the city auditor's office from that perspective. I'll stop there because I know we'll have a lot of questions on this topic. One thing I did want to point out, and I can't remember who asked the question regarding the creation of the office, and then what is the role of the city manager afterwards? Once the council created that office, clearly it becomes a department of the city, and it's the responsibility of the city manager. Question is, how much more influence does the mayor and the council have on that department? Well, practically speaking, there are different ways to be able to do that. And in the city of San Jose, a lot of times you use committees to review departmental work plans, or the council can ask and say, and the mayor can say, I'd like you to present the work plan of this department so that we have some input on what we would like to see as priorities. So again, that's the practicality of it. Even though it is under the city manager, again, the policymakers do have an opportunity to be able to weigh in as to what the priorities of a specific department may be. But anyway, I'll stop there and take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you for, thank both of you for your thoughts, and Mr. Duenas, thank you for addressing that first question going in. So I've got, I'll take a stack here. I've got Commissioner Burros, Tran, and Monley.
Thank you, Lawrence. I don't have immediate questions. I'd just like to notify the chair that I am present. I did join late, but if the minutes can reflect that I took my seat at 6:30 p.m.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrows. The notes will show so.
Thank you. Commissioner Tran.
Thank you. I do have a few questions that are unrelated, and I don't know if the best way to approach this would be just to kind of go round robin before coming back. But my first question to Mayor Gonzalez, during your term, did you ever find any limitations in your role from being able to respond to any issues or crises that may have arisen?
Thank you, Commissioner Tran. I don't know that there were limitations. I would just follow on to what Norberto ended his comments on, and that is the ability to lead, the ability to influence. We, at the very start of my first term, I set out a number of very specific objectives for what I hope would be 8 years, and luckily it was 8 years. Things like building, 10,000 affordable homes in 8 years. We got bond measures. Councilmember Lazat, remember we passed a number of bond measures in 2000 for libraries and parks and open space and fires. Well, 2 years later it was fire stations and a police substation. So these were voter approved projects, and I wanted to make sure that we were staying on top of them. So it was pretty common for me to meet in consultation with the city manager and various department heads on a monthly basis. For example, Leslie Corsiglia, who was the director of housing for most of the time I was mayor, will tell you that she met with me monthly to talk about, how many units of affordable housing we were building, how many were in the planning stages, how many were anticipated, how much land was being sold for that purpose. So you can, by the leadership, by the bully pulpit of the mayor's office, you can get a lot done, and I think we did. And so I don't feel that I was ever hampered.
Looks like we're frozen for a moment here. Commissioner Tran, if it's okay with you, why don't we come back and try and limit it to one question per commissioner to start, to make sure we hear from as many of you as possible.
Thank you.
Commissioners Monley, Marshman, and Siegel. Commissioner Monley.
Just unmute myself.
Sure.
Good evening. I just have a question that I'm wondering if both our guests, Ron and Mr. Duenas, can answer regarding your feelings of each of these types of government from the perspective of what are the pitfalls that you see of the other side from a strong mayor council to a council manager. Can you both speak to that from the opposite perspective?
Yeah, I don't know if Ron's back yet, but I'll go ahead. I'll try that, Elizabeth. Yeah, I mean, I've always looked, when people outside of my friends outside of government, when they would ask you, what do you do? What is a city manager? What's his role? And I always, the best example I could give to them was, think of the city as a big corporation with many different business lines that provide services to the community: police, fire, public works, et cetera. And so if you have an organization, I always felt that it was extremely important that departments, department heads come from a strong professional background, and that you create an organization that really is different, is driven by good public administration principles. And it's as close as what people like to say, well, I'd like you to run the city like a business. Well, that's a big different conversation, but you do take pieces of running like a business. And one of the things is you want to put the best people possible in the right positions as professionals to run programs. And so from my perspective, I believe that the council manager provides that form of government. It also provides something that's very important for the organization from that perspective. It provides, I believe, a level of stability and continuity on the side of staff, of individuals that may want to come and work in this organization, that understand that it's driven by a professional manager. And the political dynamics are there, but their future does not necessarily depend on who the next mayor is going to be. So this is kind of just very top level conversation. So I've always felt that that's the advantage. I think in San Jose, then you add that little extra that Measure J did, that I thought was appropriate and good for the organization. Maybe many purists that believe in city manager, and I remember when that was passed, there was that nervousness. It's like, oh my God, now the mayor's going to talk about the budget, and we're going to have performance audit, and you have these committees, and that's the original response. But at the end of the day, I believe it did make the organization much more responsive to the needs of the community and to the wishes of the policymakers. We have to have a lot of respect for the policymakers that elected by over 100,000 people. And so the tweaks that Measure J made, I think, were extremely significant. And that's why I kind of go back to, are the things that are available to the mayor and to the council, are they being used as effectively as possible? Because I believe there's room there. Now, do I think that we should look, given what's transpired over the last year, last couple of years, again, another shockwave that's hit our community? Absolutely, we should take a look at it. But the thing is, I think what we need to remember is, does the engine need a complete overhaul, or does it need some adjustments to certain valves and some changes in certain pieces? And I think, and that's kind of the way I approach the issue. I mean, at the end of the day, it'll be what comes out and what the voters decide. But that's kind of the way I process it, because here's the thing: the city charter change, as you can tell, it's a big deal. The last major one was done when I was 25 years old, that I was part of that Charter Review Commission. And I'm a little bit older than that right now. And so, and that's a good thing, because those changes will have some very significant long-term effects to the organization. And I view it as a manager. I've always viewed it from that perspective. What transpires within the organization? What do we expect could happen? And so there are no absolutes. That's purely my personal and professional perspective. There are plenty of examples of strong mayors that work. But again, this is our San Jose, this is our community, and we really need to ask ourselves the question, what is it that we're trying to fix, and how can we fix it either going a full-blown major overhaul, or is this a time to do another adjustment the way we did with Measure J?
Can you hear me
very
now?
much.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back. You're
I'm
back.
sorry. It must be my Wi-Fi. You know what I'm going to do, Mr. Chair? I'm going to turn my video off so I use a little bit less of the bandwidth, so you won't have to look at this ugly face while I talk. But I just wanted to conclude with Mr. Tran's question and follow on to Norberto. I would say that the only time that I felt constrained by the current system initially would have been early in my first term when, quite frankly, there were a few department heads that were carryovers for, and Norberto probably remembers some of these folks. They were carryovers from who had been in their positions a long, long time. And quite frankly, when you're in that kind of position, you can develop a characteristic that you think that you're the mayor or you're the department emeritus forever. And so there were times when, at the request of council members who were getting very frustrated with certain departments that weren't responding to district issues and district needs, where they asked me to talk to the city manager, and I did. And I told him, I said, this particular department head is not responding. I just don't think he or she is going to be a mix for the future. And I'm sure Norberto had to deal with those kinds of situations too. But, I would say that one of the things that had me thinking about the mayor council form of government is what kind of community is San Jose versus what kind of community was it when it developed the council manager form of government. Council manager form of government was pretty much post World War II. If you look at cities before World War II, they were pretty much what they would refer to as strong mayor form of governments. That's why you find them mostly in the Northeast, the Midwest. But those cities that grew fast, like San Jose after World War II, they developed a more kind of university model, the council manager form of government. And, I would say, has San Jose, the question I would ask, has San Jose matured to the point where you need to have that strong leader? Who would have thought 18 months ago that we'd be facing still a pandemic after 12 months of what we've been through? What will we need when the big earthquake hits? We don't know. And I don't know that we're ever going to be properly prepared for that. But I think that's one of the questions that I would ask if I were in this commission is, has this city matured to the point where maybe we do need some adjustments? Maybe not a full, turn to the mayor council form of government, but maybe some adjustments, as Roberto also suggested. Roberto, I'm sorry.
Great, thank you. So we have Commissioners Marshman, Siegel, Matsumura, and then Tran. Commissioner Marshman.
Thank you. Norberto, that was great. One of my questions was exactly that. Do you think it's worth looking at changes? Ron, could I just ask you what, sorry, that's my husband retrieving the dog. It's driving me nuts. Could I ask you what criteria would you use for deciding if new changes are due? What problems do you think that going to an incrementally stronger mayor might solve for a larger city?
Well, let me be clear. I'm not advocating for one over the other.
Yep.
I don't know how much. I don't know where I got cut off, but one of the things I was suggesting is that maybe you interview or have as a guest speaker a mayor from what we would quickly label as a strong mayor form of government. San Diego, Los Angeles. I think Fresno may actually have a strong mayor form of government. I'm not sure. But I think the question is, in this day of split-second decisions, do we have a system that provides for that kind of responsiveness? When the mayor has a crisis he or she is dealing with, does that person have the time to work through, convince the city manager, convince the city council, all these types of things? The reality, and maybe I'm wrong at this, but I think the reality is that most people in San Jose, for that matter, any city, really don't know what form of government they have. What they do know is they elected the mayor of San Jose to get the job done. And when the job is not getting done, they don't blame the city council, they don't blame the city manager, they blame the mayor. So, one could easily say is, if the buck stops at my desk, then, why am I having to work through the bureaucracy to get stuff done? So that's how I'd respond. And I think the criteria would be, the split secondness of decisions nowadays, the social media, all these types of things maybe warrant a whole different delivery system than what we're used to. Maybe there's an entirely different model that's out there that needs to be designed, given today's, the way work is done now.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you. And the one answer to the problems that are being posed is the election of a city manager. If city managers could be elected, then we would have a situation where they would be responsible to the citizens and accountable in a very direct way, and responsive. So when I spoke about this last time, the answer that I got was that the Association of City Managers prevents city managers from participating, from being political, from actually running for office. And if a city manager actually runs for office, then they're no longer eligible to be city manager ever again. So my question to both of you is, what do you think about this? What if San Jose had a system where we only, where we actually elected people who have a history of being city managers? Do you think anybody would run, given that they could never be hired as a city manager again?
I'll let you go first, Norberto.
I think it's less about not being able to be a city manager ever again, and more about the feeling that all of a sudden this feels more like a political political campaign and a political decision. So I think, when I think about that, I think about that multiple people would want to run for city manager. I think it's injecting a political dynamic to to a position that is traditionally been a professional appointee. Again, I find the I find the suggestion intriguing. I would think there are some similarities in other positions in other places. For example, I believe in Santa Clara, the chief of police runs for office, and it's similar also to sheriffs in certain counties. But from my perspective, the individual that would do that, I think, really needs to feel comfortable about, hey, I'm getting ready to run a campaign, for city manager, and what would that entail in terms of election laws and raising money and all that. That's kind of my initial thought on that. It really does feel that you're running for office, and that may be good for some folks, but I think it would attract a different type of candidate. That's my sense.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think that's a viable option. You have these men and women who go to college, they train to be a professional, pretty much like someone who trains to be a private sector executive, with an MBA, that type of thing. I just don't see that many of them, unless they're moving towards retirement, that'd be different, and they decide, and there have been some city managers have done that, they've retired, then run for public office, but they're far and few between. And I just think that it's a very different type of person that trains to be a professional city or public sector manager, and they're not likely to be many candidates to line up that would be crazy enough to run for mayor.
Great, thank you both. And thank you for the question, Commissioner Siegel. Commissioner Matsumura, Fuentes, and then Tran.
Thank you. So, I think the scenario and the frustration we're dealing with, and that Mayor Gonzalez spoke to, is the desire of the public to see its government produce things that it's not producing. And I think there's a couple of scenarios that we're looking at here that you've both started to speak to, that we're trying to play out how it's operating now versus how it could operate with tweaks or more than tweaks to our form of governance. So I'm wondering if Mayor Gonzalez, you could speak to your experience of the scenario. Is what was an example of a time that you needed to move something fast or move something as a mayor, and you were unable to work with a majority of the city council to get that done? Because I think that's a scenario that we're trying to understand more here. And sort of for a counterpart scenario from City Manager Duenas, I'm wondering if you can talk about a time when the majority of the council viewed the actions of management staff as out of keeping with the direction of the council, and perhaps the public was upset with the ways that that management staff weren't implementing policy direction. What were the mechanisms that were used to deal with that, and were they effective?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Matsumura. I would say that I'm again, 15 years have gone by. I can't remember a single situation where if I thought something was important to get done, a new policy, new program, new budget item, whatever, that the council was a deterrent to that. I will say that there were times when certain departments were not, in my opinion, responding quick enough, or who were not on a path to meet our objectives that were approved by the council in our budget sessions and other policy areas. And I will readily admit, I was not shy about sharing that with the city manager at the time. And I don't know if that led to changes or not, but pretty much all the goals we set out in year one, I listed affordable housing as one of them, but also, strong neighborhoods initiative, making San Jose the safest big city in America in 2 years. All these kinds of things got done because the city manager, and in this case, it was a male, and his team, got to work. And so I just didn't feel that the form of government was a hang-up. It might have happened even faster, possibly, if it was a mayor council form of government, but I never felt like the council got in the way. I mean, they asked really important questions, and there were a lot of debates, and don't misunderstand me. In many cases, they helped the program become even better, or they have to become even better. And in the area of affordable housing, as an example, every single one of them was out there pitching, for certain affordable housing communities in their district. So every one of them took on their fair share. But I just felt that sometimes the city departments could have been a little quicker on the response side and more consistent in the response side.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of that question from my perspective, and when the administration is not responding, it's extremely important, and the administration itself, and it really starts in the city manager's office along with their deputies, the deputy city managers, where they take very seriously what the policy direction is that this mayor and council has approved, and it's our job to execute it. And if it's not happening the way the mayor and the council expected, then we're not doing our jobs. I can't, again, testing my memory a little bit, I think the differences of opinion a lot of times were around particular projects that were not moving fast enough, or a difference in policy. Maybe there could be a difference between departments on approach, whether it was the housing department with a focus on affordable housing, or the planning department feeling that we needed to keep, land use for economic development. So you have kind of that push and pull, but at the end of the day, the mayor has to create that consensus so that staff has the clear direction to go, which was very easy for me to say, this is the direction. It is my job to make sure that we implement this. And I know throughout the years, whether I was a project manager or later on as a deputy or city manager, I made whatever adjustments or suggestions I felt needed to be made to make sure that we were meeting the mayor and council's expectation. So it really came down to more specific items, as you're asking in what items, what type of situations that happen. I do want to I do want to make a point, and I know this is related to Ron's decision, and I remember when Ron came on board, two big initiatives: Strong Neighborhoods Initiative and affordable housing, which included a teacher housing program that was extremely important for the mayor and the council at that time. When Ron came on board, it was very clear, and that if I may, Ron, that you felt that this organization from a administrative leadership needed something different. And so the question that people ask, what can the mayor do under the current system? Well, the mayor in that particular case decided to bring someone with a different sets of skills and experience that was from outside the organization. The city manager at that point, Del Borgstorff, new approach, new ideas, city with a focus on economic development. And not only that, but gave the city manager the opportunity to build their own team. And so what you saw in San Jose in that period of time was not only a city manager from the outside, but also individuals that he brought in to support the initiatives. That's a call that's made by the mayor under this structure that says, I need to make sure that this moves in the right direction. I feel that this is something that needs to happen. And once those different pieces are in place, then the rest of the organization begins to adjust to the new leadership to make sure that we're moving in that direction. So,
and I would add just one more thing, one more footnote to Norberto's comment. The city manager, Del Borgstorff, at that time, he and I had numerous conversations because as these bond measures were getting passed, our list of capital projects, I think at one time, Councilmember Lazat may be able to help me on this. I want to say we at one time had 200 capital projects that, parks, libraries, streets, all, everything you can imagine going on at one time. So the city manager at that time, we talked about who was going to keep track of all this stuff, because sometimes the Department of Public Works did it, sometimes the library did it, sometimes the city Parks and Recreation did it. And he decided to bring on kind of a capital works czar. I think Terry Roberts was his name. Great guy, man. He did an incredible job. I think at one point he had a spreadsheet that had something like 300 projects on it. And he did not give in to these department heads when they wanted change orders or time adjustments. He just stuck to his guns, and all that stuff got built either when I was mayor or in subsequent years after I was mayor.
Great, thank you both. We have Commissioners Fuentes and Percival.
Lawrence, I just want to give you a heads up. I got about 5 more minutes.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll take whatever time we have, and we do need to wrap up here shortly. I want to, if we can, get to at least Commissioner Fuentes and Commissioner Percival, because we haven't heard from them yet. So, Commissioner Fuentes.
Okay, so I'll make it brief. First of all, a big thank you to Mayor Gonzalez and City Manager Dueñas, and also thank you for all that you shared, your insight as far as how you did the work when you were in leadership for our city. I try to make this a quick question. We have made a commitment to racial, economic, and gender equity is the lens that we're going to be using, that we use for everything we do as a commission. And I would like to give give you a question of asking you if you think of where we are today as a city, and we as a commission, want to look for what we can do today to carry us through the next 10, 20 years into the future. And given what we're living through in our city today, related to the economic, racial, and gender inequities, what would you suggest to us in terms of changes and modifications? While I appreciate, I'm sorry, this is not a quick comment and question. While I appreciate what you are showing us of what can really be done today with what already exists in terms of the charter and the powers and duties that exist for everyone, what do you think can be done to improve our charter today?
Well, thank you, Commissioner Fuentes, and always good to see you. Thank you for your leadership in the community too. I think it goes back to the point I made earlier is, what is the rate of speed in San Jose these days? And sometimes I think the speed of the community is so much faster than our government institutions are or can be. And I say, I don't know if they can be any faster. I mean, there's so many demands that go into City Hall. I mean, you have no idea how big San Jose is until you're the mayor of this town. It's just incredibly huge, and I gotta believe there's a multiplier that's taken effect over the last 15 years that just makes it huger, if that's such a word. But I think that it's going to take some real digging on this commission's part to answer your question, Commissioner Fuentes. I don't know what the answer is. I've got to be honest. I govern in a very different time. We tried to do, racial and economic and gender equity in my days were, how are we spending our money? Where are we spending our money? And that's why when I came into the City Hall and I looked at our library plan, we had Mayor Hammer had previously adopted a very well thought out strategic plan for where branch libraries would go and these types of things, but there was no money for that. So we had a lot of low-income neighborhoods had no branch library, had no fire station. The basic things that any citizen, a resident judges their city government by. And so that's why we started to focus on kind of, you stick to the knitting sometimes in government, just get the things done that people expect. And what they expect is for the garbage to be picked up on time, water to come out of the spout when they turn it, and have a safe park in the neighborhood, and be able to go to the library and check out a book, all these kinds of things. And so for us, that was racial equity. It was spending our redevelopment money in a neighborhood other than downtown. And let me tell you, I took some heat for that, and I seen Alberto nodding his head, and I just came in and said, hey, and that's why we came up with the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative. It was a very quick way to say, one, let's get the people involved in defining their own needs in their own neighborhoods rather than a bunch of city planners doing that. And Councilmember Lazat will remember there were committees that worked on stuff for years, presented their plan, and it turned out it wasn't their plan. It was, the consultant's plan, and we rejected it, and they started back on square one. So, I think what you're talking about is a lot of hard work and dedication. And I don't know if you're going to look at this issue, but I don't know how you can expect that kind of impact in 8 years, in 2 4-year terms. I don't know how you get that sustainability. And the reality is that now mayor comes in, works for 8 years, new person comes in, they have a different set of priorities. What happened? And staff sitting going, well, wait a second, the last person, this was the most important thing on the agenda, and now you're saying it's not even on your agenda. So, I just think the continuity is going to be something else you're going to have to look at. And I know it's a 4-letter word, but term limits, I don't know. I don't know how you avoid that question moving forward. If you are, maybe you are going to study. I don't know. Sorry it took so long.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Thank you, former Mayor Gonzalez. And if you need to jump, that's great. Norberto, Mr. Duenas, hope you can stay for this question and one more.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for working on our city. I love it.
Thank
Thank you for your
you.
time.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Maria, for the question. I mean, the way I look at it is, we look at structures when we're talking about charter, and I think there's something that I think is important to keep in mind. Look, behind every charter, every structure, it's really the people in the organization that make things happen. And so, that's really the conversation. The staff will respond. The staff will take the direction from the policymakers, and they will move because that's what needs to happen. And so, as we're looking at to your question, it's less about the structure, but it's more about who do we want leading the city over this next difficult period. And I think what you're seeing after this shock is you'll always see a movement. I'm hearing it already from the city. This is not to come back the way it used to be. This is an opportunity to come back to be better in a better situation. And clearly, what's happened with COVID-19 and the events of the past, it's really brought up the issues of inequity very clear front and center. And there's no way that anyone can move away from that. But then the question is, there really is, the structure will do something for that. But at the end of the day, it's got to be the structure with the right people, the people that are committed to the community, to the organization, from a longer term perspective, and policymakers that are willing to spend the time and energy to really move that needle. As to Ron's point, in his time, and I remember in that time, the issue of equity was redevelopment dollars were not going into neighborhoods that really needed infrastructure. And so how do you make that course correction? And that was done. But then what happened? Redevelopment eventually went away, and cities lost that tool to be able to maybe continue to address issues of equity. So then it's a bigger picture. It's like, I've heard discussions of, should there be ever a discussion of redevelopment again, but with a complete focus on just affordable housing and neighborhood revitalization. And so this really opens the door, all to say, Maria, that it's beyond the structure. It's beyond that charter change. There's got to be different elements and different tools as part of that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. We're going to take one more question from, I know there's a few people that have raised their hands again, but just in the interest of time, would like to hear from Commissioner Percival, and also want to respect or one remaining guest speaker's time too. So Commissioner Percival.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Lawrence, and thank you, Norberto, for taking our questions. I just wanted to bring up a point that former Mayor Gonzalez brought up earlier about, for a lot of people, local government is the mayor, right? They don't spend a lot of time trying to understand, the different nuanced structures in city government. People are busy, right? They don't think about these things.
Commissioner Percival, we lost your audio somehow. Am I the only one?
No, I can't hear you.
And now it looks like you still there?
I'm still here, yeah.
Here you are, okay.
Okay, yeah, I've been having problems with my internet. Can you hear me?
Story of the day.
Yeah, so I'll just go till my internet dies on me. But so I'm wondering about issues of equity and racial equity, particularly on an issue like policing, for example, where there's a lot of concern about police responsiveness, and in a system of government where, let's say, the mayor does not appoint or oversee the police department, do you think, does that lead to a sense of lack of transparency or lack of accountability if the manager is overseeing, say, the police department? Or in Roberto, in your experience, did you feel sort of any kind of political pressure in sort of events, like really publicized events that affected large groups of people to take action, even though it was not, your role as a city manager is not political, right? So I guess I'm trying to sort of understand that balance when a mayor feels rightful pressure to take action to address a real concern in the community, but doesn't have direct control over it. And does that lead to a sense of illegitimacy in city government, or does that affect the city manager's office in a way that we might not think of normally?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I'm trying to think of certain, I was lucky enough that in my case and my issues were a little bit different and internal, but to your point, I'm going back to the issue of the individuals in the positions of leadership, certainly I wasn't here, I wasn't part of the organization during the protests, and certainly tracked it as a San Jose citizen, but I really do feel that when these events happen, then that's when the city's leadership, really comes together to be able to not only work the issue, but then evaluate what happened and then put in place systems and policy changes to move forward. I never felt, at least in my own experience, I never felt any political pressure from that standpoint, but I do in my approach, even though I was not an elected official, I know that I knew that I was a public servant, and even though I was not elected, the people, it was an important component of the way I made my decisions. And so I say that because everybody takes different approaches. And in my case, I just felt that was just an extremely important piece for me to bring to the table, having worked in neighborhoods and just the way my career developed. But I never felt, that political pressure. It does test the system, clearly. And I know that there's been some conversations in terms of if there is a major, again, emergency that happens, within the organization, is there any room for having a conversation where in particular situations, the mayor may be given certain duties and responsibilities or certain powers that he otherwise would not have under the regular day-to-day operations of an organization. And so, I mean, pick the example in my case when I was there, it would be the Coyote Creek flood. The San Jose Council declares an emergency. Could there be an opportunity to evaluate because people feel that the mayor's in the front, the mayor's making those decisions during very tough situations? Is that an opportunity to give the mayor, a little bit more responsibility to be able, under those special circumstances, to really drive that in a way that he feels or she feels that could be effective?
Great. Thank you. And thank you all. We do need to move on just because of the other items and allowing for some discussion on the work plan. There may be other questions. If you have other questions that this conversation has brought about, please send them my way so that we can address them somehow. But for now, I want to thank Roberto very much for your time. Really appreciate your insights. Very helpful for the commission. I know all the commissioners are grateful, and some are waving you goodbye.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for your service. This is very important. Appreciate you making the time. Thank you.
Roberto, for being our pinch hitter tonight. You were awesome. It was good to see you.
Yeah, really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Really appreciate
Good
you
night.
coming in and saving the day for us.
Sure
Thank you
thing.
so much for your service to our city. Thanks,
Thank
Roberto, and thank you to the commissioners. Great questions. I know we could have spent a lot more time. I want to move us to our public comment. So members of the public that wish to address the commission during this study session. And Tony, I'll turn it over to you or Megan to call on the public.
Roland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members. Good evening, and I'm not seeing a timer. I'd like to briefly echo Norberto's Joanna's questions. What is it that we try to fix, and what are the long-term effects of change? I can give you two examples of the first and one of the last. First of all, the power of the mayor. Why does our mayor need enhanced powers to fire someone? As an example, why don't you ask former city manager Ed Chicago how he was fired by Mayor-elect Ricardo back in December 2014? First question. Moving on to the next one. I don't know if you discussed this tonight, but there was a discussion of shifting mayoral elections 2 years to align with presidential elections, allegedly to boost the Latino vote during mayoral elections. But this begs the questions of how Mayor Gonzalez could possibly have been elected back in 1999. And my last point is on unintended consequences. Let's suppose that we do shift elections by 2 years. And the question now becomes, what happens to the 2 years between 2022 and 2024? Because in my humble opinion, the last thing that a city needs right now is an additional 2 years of Mayor Ricardo. And that concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Roland. Next speaker.
Robert Brownstein?
Good evening. I was interested in Ron Gonzalez's comments about the fact that everything is moving fast now and there have to be split-second decisions. And I found that interesting because in my experience, even more currently, as opposed to when I was actually working at the city, the reason government often takes time to make decisions isn't because of bureaucracy. It's because there are multiple constituencies with multiple points of view. And to get a split-second decision and assumes that there is a right and a wrong, when actually what the government is facing is a situation in which it's right for some people and it's wrong for other people. Having a green line was wrong for developers, but it was right for a lot of other people. And the delay has to deal with the fact that you want to have a decision that recognizes those multiple constituencies and a process that gives them a chance to be truly represented. And it also came to mind that the kind of very current scenario where that we're all aware of, where you might want to see a split-second decision, is the handling of the pandemic that we're all suffering through. And I look at the past year of the pandemic and I think, was the public best served by having somebody like Sarah Cody, who's by training an epidemiologist, making a split-second decision regarding public health? Or is the public better served by having elected officials make decisions, split-second decisions, where a virus expands exponentially and you have an elected official with no background in public health, but a concern about political variables making that kind of decision? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brownstein. Next speaker.
Callers 8794. Caller 8794, press *6 to unmute.
Hi, this is Blair Beekman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi. Thank you for the efforts of this item. I guess to mark the words of or to note the words of the previous speaker, to consider emergency situations, that's important. The work I do with accountability, with technology, and in fact, the speaker last week spoke of how do we prepare ourselves better in the time of emergency. We made bad decisions out of the era of 9/11, and that with the issues of COVID, there was some difficult decision making to be made. If we work on our good practices now, that is how we prepare ourselves. And it's important we learn how to do that. And that's what openness with accountability with technology can do, among other things. I was also really impressed that there's a part of the charter that speaks to a specific, that the public has a right to ask questions of its counsel within the public setting. That's an important concept that technology accountability is working on. It's the ideas of sustainability and peace, actual peace. And that's, you talk about life in those terms and our good democratic practices. That's the future we're building. That's the sustainability. That answers a lot of questions. So thank you for your words today. Good luck in our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Next speaker.
Robert Reese.
I had a couple of ideas for enhancing the clarity of the comparison charts, not only for the commission, but also for the community once you start your community outreach. I think that under the concepts of policy development and policy implementation, the role of the council is diminished. Certainly, the council is involved in policy development, but in the comparison form under the mayor council, it speaks to only the mayor proposing. Under the council manager, it says only the manager can recommend. And under our current system, it says mayor and manager. In fact, the council just had their priority setting session. There's various mechanisms that the council brings up policy issues. The other concept on policy implementation, where it says the council has no role. The council has a big role in policy information through the power of the budget. And if the council wants to implement something, there will be a debate over the dollars that will be spent to do it. In fact, that's been what a lot of discussion has been over the last year that has resulted in long council meetings as we found out there was things we should have been working on and haven't been working on. The other thing that I think you need to have an understanding of, and this should be a line item, is the appointment of the vacancies created by a council member leaving. That's going to be really important because the mayor needs to be able to whip votes. And as it is now, it looks like the council does it. I think in the mayor council form of governments, the mayor makes the appointment, and it's better to have a clear understanding of the implications of that now rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reese. Next speaker.
That was the final speaker.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That concludes our new business item B tonight, and now we'll move to our old business. And first I want to ask an update from staff on the community engagement, research analysts, some of the items that we were requesting in the letter. Tony and Mark, if you want to give us your updates.
Hi, I can go first. I think Tony, unless you have something you want to bring up before me.
I'll let you go first. We have a little bit of drama going on in my neighborhood.
So I think that some of the questions that were posed to me in particular at the last meeting was, one, does the city attorney's office have a pool of pre-qualified attorneys for outside counsel? The city attorney's office does have a pool of qualified attorneys. However, they are issue specific. For example, we have attorneys that we contract with for retirement plans, for employee benefits, bond counsel, etc. We don't have any attorney that's been qualified for something quite like this. as particularly since it would be a little more involved and will depend quite a bit on the amount that is budgeted for any work that is requested. There was also a question as to whether or not Hanson Bridget, the contract that it has with the Board of Fair Campaign and Political Practices, would be an option. That contract under the municipal code is for the independent evaluator. It's a contract that the council approves, so that the council has to amend it. The municipal code also requires that that the contract be fully funded, essentially, and that is a requirement under the municipal code. I also have some concerns about the independent evaluator for the Board of Fair Campaign and Political Practices being involved in this work, since it was discussed at prior meetings that campaign finance and things like that might be on this commission's work plan or an agenda. I also think that it would make sense to do some kind of procurement for this. There might be one, we would want to see what rates a law firm would charge for this work, which will be driven largely by the budget that is allocated for it. And it would also allow for certain parameters to be put in place as to what the city and the commission and the city council wants to see from an outside law firm for this work. Residency requirements, or non-residency requirements, that they represent certain, that they don't represent certain individuals, things like that, that we would want to vet as you move forward with selecting somebody for this role. But again, the main criteria is the amount of money that would be allocated for this project, and that will drive what type of procurement we have to do under the municipal code.
Mark, on the other part of answering your question also is about what's the capacity of the city attorney's office itself?
Well, I mean, the city attorney's office is here to serve all departments of the city. I've been attending these meetings, and it is something that I've been giving a priority, and I was involved in the work in July last summer. There are also other attorneys in my office who would likely get involved in this, particularly as other departments, other areas would be involved. You know, I don't want to speak for my employer, but I can speak for myself, in that, you know, I'm confident that I can handle the work that the commission has for me.
Okay, thank you. And Tony?
Okay, so let me turn on video as well. I'm looking off to a side monitor for my notes. So the first one is regarding the Civic Makers contract and adding a research component. We would not have to RFP that out. We can revise the scope within, we have limitations to how we could revise the scope, but according to my staff, we could revise the scope and we could add it. So that's something I could negotiate with Lawrence. But on the free side, we have an intern, again, who's starting on Monday, who's eager to do research. She's just graduated with her BA last year. She started her MPA this year, and she thinks this is a very exciting project. And it's something that she could maybe work towards her MPA project at the end of her degree. So she's very eager to start researching. So that's maybe something Lawrence and I can work out between him and her. Maybe we open up his scope to include some research, and then we'd have to go in and do a mid-year budget request, we'd have to do a budget request. It's not a significant amount of money, so I think it would probably just kind of get approved through. I can't guarantee it, but it's something that we could do. For that, outside counsel, you already talked about community outreach. So what I did, like, because I treat the city's money as if it's my own money, and I looked at what can I do for the lowest cost. So I requested the mailing lists of all of the organizations on the mailing lists in the city council offices. So I can do direct, instead of relying on the council offices to make the contacts out to the community, directly do it. I think we've heard back from almost every district. Megan's already been compiling it. I've got some more after she's compiled the list. So then we would be directly communicating to all the different organizations instead of relying on council offices to do that. I've also talked with the Office of Racial Equity about how we can use them and how we can use their contacts to do more community engagement that we could do directly.
So we could expand Civic Maker's contract, which would then not have a full procurement system. We could use the attorney's office for additional work that's directly related to commission adjustments. And then the translation interpretation, I think you've sent us the information specifically on that. And then Lawrence also did some research on what are the vendors that are city approved already. So do you want to address the issue of community engagement around, are there any current vendors, approved vendors that are able to do community engagement under the current city approved vendors list?
I did not do that research.
Okay.
I'm talking with department heads who have done this. I'm in meetings all day, every day. So I didn't get through the procurement list. I know my vendors for interpretation were taken from the vendor list.
Great. Okay. So that's another possibility. So I just wanted to update the commissioners on kind of what we've been looking at to try to figure out if the council or when they give us money. And we're going to talk about Commissioner Matsumura's memo. Once we've started to look at kind of what we wanted to do, I wanted to be ahead of the game of being able to say, and actually here's some of the ways that we could implement this, and here's some of the ways we still don't know what we're going to be able to do. So the commission has some options, but I didn't want to wait and then figure out the money and then say, oh gosh, now how do we start to look at spending it? So I was trying to be expedient, just giving you some more information. So Mark and Tony, I appreciate your research, and Lawrence certainly as well. And I see a bunch of hands, so I'm going to go to some folks first. Commissioner Tran.
Yes, actually, a question for Mark. So, I know that you kind of testified that you have capacity to service the needs here of our commission, but I actually want to clarify more like your role. One of the comments that come up is basically what's the need here for outside counsel, and I think the reason there has been that question is we want to find out like what's your job here, because I want to be clear in terms of my expectations with counsel, right? Which is that as the work of the commission, we're not turning to our attorney to tell us what we can and cannot do, but rather, but once we identify, what it is that we want to, that counsel will support our efforts and find ways to ensure that whatever it is that we propose is compliant with the law.
Well, so yes, my role here is to advise the commission on the things that it can and cannot do, and that is with respect to, say, like the Brown Act, for example, providing guidance and training on that, things with the Public Records Act and things like that, which I've provided advice on. I would also assist in drafting any, or could assist in drafting any legal documents that you might require, either draft documents or things like that, that could be submitted to the city council, whether it's a resolution that would go into the measure for a charter amendment, implementing ordinances and things like that. That was what my role, as well as my office's role, was during this debate last year. I was involved in drafting the ballot measure that didn't go forward. But my role here is to represent the interests of the city. The city is my client, or is the client of the city attorney's office. And part of that role is assisting this commission. At the end of the day, the city council will decide, if it does decide at all, what will go before the voters with a charter amendment. And the city attorney's role is to advise on what is and is not appropriate or allowed under a charter.
I think I want to kind of clarify that point. Like, if we have a proposal or an idea, right? Is it your job to come in and tell us outright, no, you cannot do that? Or is your job to come in and tell us, hey, you know what, let's find a way to make this work?
Well, I think it's a philosophy. I mean, my approach, and I think my office's approach, is to assist the city and city departments, city commissions, et cetera, in achieving their goals. To the extent that there is something that's a full stop, you cannot do it under the law. Black letter law says that it's not okay. We would advise you on that, as well as the city council.
And then outside of that advice, you also, though, will draft for us any of the resolutions or any of the documentation that is needed to get this before the city council?
Yes, I can assist in that. You know, and it probably would be with the assistance of some of the commissioners or other staff. But, you know, when this item came before the council, we prepared a resolution with a red line for the charter, and took the initial draft of the amendment or charter amendment that the council directed us to do, and so that would be the role that I would have if that's what the commission directs.
And just if I could jump in, Civic Makers and I do have scope in our budget to prepare the majority and, if necessary, minority reports. We recognize that advice of counsel as far as the implications of certain policy recommendations is necessary and critical. So we would work in collaboration with City Attorney's Office, should that be the counsel that is available and decided by commissioners to suffice. We would work in collaboration with others, you know, if that opportunity presents itself. But, you know, just want to make it clear that as part of our work as the facilitator, we've been taking process notes, which we've been sharing to capture the discussion up to this point, which hasn't included many policy recommendations, but that will start to become a repository of ideas that can be drawn upon, both for future discussion, which we'll get into a little bit later with the work plan, but also the drafting of those reports.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Trent. Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you. My question is both for Lawrence and Mark. In the Google Docs presentation, what's listed is a position called CAO, which I take it is Chief Administrative Officer. Is that referring to the city manager? That's the first part of the question. If you could just
yes. Yeah, I mean, not every city calls it the city manager, but the Chief Administrative Officer is the generic name for that role compared to the Chief Executive Officer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And so it seems that part of the confusion for the public, for example, Roland and the public's, was, I guess, under the impression that the mayor has the power to actually, if he doesn't like what the city manager is doing, that the mayor does have the power to fire the city manager, but that's not true, correct?
Let's see, I'm going to refer to that chart. Removal of CAO, the appointment removal of the council. The mayor nominates a chief administrative officer, i.e. city manager. Council approves. The council can vote to remove the city manager, or there can be a recall by the electors of the city of San Jose. That's the voters of the city of San Jose. Right. So the mayor only has the power to remove the city manager in the mayor council form, which is not San Jose's form of governance.
Okay, so this just a point of clarity. When we were earlier discussing potentially giving the mayor emergency powers and having, you know, possibly that being one of them, he currently, just to be clear, currently, if the mayor doesn't like what the city manager is doing, he has no power to directly fire the city manager.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then my second, the second part of this is for Mark. Mark, just to clarify, if there is a, do you work for, I know you said you work for the city of San Jose, But in terms of conflicts, do you work for the mayor or for the city manager?
Well, so I work for the entity that is the city of San Jose, which I can get into. It can get quite complicated, and we often have debates about who is the client. But I represent the interests of the city itself. So not one individual, not one person. The city attorney's office staffs city council meetings and advises the council. And to the extent that the city council is considered "quote unquote" the city, then that's who the city attorney's office is largely responsible for, and then everything then flows from there. I think the only situation where, sorry to interrupt, the only situation where the city attorney's office directly represents the city manager is in employment disputes.
Would you consider this commission part of the city?
Well, it is a commission that has been created by the city council, and so it is part of the city of San Jose, and it will provide a recommendation to the city council for them to act upon and provide direction to staff to implement. So yes, I would consider it.
And then the final question, which might be a little sensitive, would you feel if we were asking you to do something that your direct boss perhaps wouldn't be too happy about, would you feel comfortable advising on that?
Well, to the extent that and I may lose my headset here. To the extent that it creates an actual conflict for me, then I would have to evaluate my role and the city attorney's role as well. But it is something that our role is to represent the interests of the city, not the interests of ourselves or our direct superior or anything like that. So our ethical obligations are to our client, like I said, which is the city of San Jose.
And it is the city manager that hires the city attorney, correct?
No, the city attorney's office is appointed directly by the city council.
Oh, I see, directly by the city council. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Segal. Commissioner Matsumura, and then Commissioner Marshman, and then Commissioner Lazat.
Thank you. I think we're getting increasingly synced up as a commission because I had questions along similar lines to Commissioner Siegel and Tran. Following up on the conflict of interest question, and I appreciate that you had mentioned on our previous meeting, Mr. Vani, that you didn't at this point see or anticipate conflicts of interest. Could you lay out a little bit more sort of what would constitute a conflict of interest between your ability to serve this commission versus other elements of your duty or the city attorney's office's duty to the city? So what would be some of those scenarios? Yeah, and how would you become aware of them? How would we as a commission become aware of them? How would those be navigated? How would the public become aware of how that was getting navigated?
Well, the only situation that readily comes to mind, and this has come up in the past, is with respect to any charter provision that might directly affect a city employee. This came up in the, I believe, the Measure B debate a couple of years ago, that the city attorney's office had to recuse itself. The employees of the city attorney's office had to recuse themselves, and outside counsel had to be obtained because those decisions affected the interests of all city employees, which the city attorneys, which I am, as well as other attorneys in my office. And so our direct interests would be affected. That's the one that comes most readily to mind. I'd have to do a little bit more brainstorming as to other ones that might come up. But to the extent that you're going to, which I don't believe is something that's on the table, but to the extent you're going to do something that directly affects, rank and file city employees, that might create a conflict of interest for me.
And how would that conflict get flagged? What course of action would you take? How would the commission be involved or notified? How would we proceed?
That's it.
And would we have funds available at that time for outside counsel if we don't work to make those available in advance?
You know, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't say how it all go about. I mean, it would be something that would be disclosed likely to the chair. And then if outside counsel was needed, you know, funds could be appropriated for that purpose, and you know, a request for proposal, a request for qualifications could be put out in relatively short order. As I said before, I don't see any at this moment that have arisen, and so you know, it's not something that we're preparing for in the city attorney's office at the moment.
Thank you. And then my follow-up to Commissioner Tran's questions about your role. I think it's clear from the staff presentation that we're really looking to maximize the resources available to this commission to make it as effective as possible in doing its work. And so, you know, there's a role that you have to play to respond to our questions, to flag if we are barking up any trees, so to speak, that may raise legal concerns, and in the drafting. I think that we're going to need additional support. I believe it was Mr. Brownstein in a previous meeting who raised the example of how we're going to be able to pursue equity in the city charter in a state, you know, in which Proposition 209 is still the law of the land. That's a legal question that's going to require research, and I think we're looking to have as much support as possible. And so I wonder whether, in addition to this sort of more reactive roles that you've described, and also a role sort of on the back end, what could we be calling upon this very precious and limited staffing that we have assigned to us in the form of yourself to really help make this commission more effective? How could you be serving us in that regard?
Well, I apologize. You broke up a little bit there. You know, to the extent that there's research questions that the commission would like the city attorney's office to look into, you know, you are more than welcome to direct me to do that. We do have other attorneys in my office that I can ask for assistance as well, if necessary. You know, so I guess the question is you know, I'm at your disposal. I'm here at every meeting, and you know, if you guys have something that you want me to look into, I'm certainly happy to do that. And if I need assistance, I can. There are resources available to me to draw on.
Thank you. I want to move to Commissioner Marshman.
I just wanted to note, just to try to keep clear what San Jose is and isn't. And I'm sorry to keep going back to this. San Jose can't recall its city manager because that's not how the city manager is appointed. The recall or firing by the city depends on how the manager is appointed. If you're not elected, you can't be recalled. You'd have to, anyway, I just wanted to clarify that. That's not something we can do.
Well, in my reading of the city charter, it actually says that the electors are allowed to do a recall of city manager. So let me just clarify that. But you know, I'm pretty sure that was when I put this presentation together. That's why I mentioned it. But I will confirm that if I can do it in this call.
I could be wrong, but in reading the general description of what the different governments, how they compared, it said that recall if you're originally elected, but maybe you can recall anybody. That's okay.
Our city charter has a recall of the city manager. Mark may be able to.
Okay.
Yes,
we do have a provision.
Yeah, section 1604, it is in the city charter, and one of the unique aspects that was added in 1990. Either it was added in 1994, but there is a mechanism to recall the city manager directly.
Thank you.
And that's our city attorney giving us opinion. What your question is? That's awesome. Commissioner Lazat.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to speak to the point that Magdalena was questioning. I think it was Magdalena, about the appointments and firing of the council appointees. So the council appointees are the manager, the city attorney, the clerk, the auditor, and the IPA. So those are all appointed by the council. And in this, it says that the mayor nominates the city manager. Well, there's a difference between what is in the policy or the chart and what happens in reality. I was around for 2 city managers, and the mayor, all of those council appointees go through like an RFP process. There's a recruitment, rather. There's a recruitment, and the best are brought back to us. So I know that as a council member, I interviewed on 2 appointments of city managers. So we interviewed more than one person, but the mayor sort of runs the recruitment. So he brought to us 2 or 3 people for us to interview, and then we settled on somebody. So it wasn't that he brought us one person and then we, blessed it. So that's how that happens. Then with regard to firing, I know the mayor can't fire the city manager or any of the council appointees, but we used to say all it takes is 6 votes. With an 11-member council, the mayor and 5 council and 10 council members, all the mayor has to do is get 5 other people to vote along with him or her, and that person is fired. So in effect, if the mayor has, a group of people that mainly support what he or she does, if he or she wants to get rid of the city manager's gone. So it's just not that he doesn't have the ability to do it. All he or she has to do is round up 5 more votes. And that's the way it works in practice.
Thank you, Commissioner Lizotte. Commissioner Tran.
Yeah, this question goes to Tony. I know that you mentioned that you have a list of organizations that you can reach out to from the city council. Are you going to just be using that list to just do announcements, or is that a list going to be in means of where you actually engage with the organizations?
Well, the way I would engage is to give them an announcement of the meetings and invite them to come to the meetings. So especially as we do hearings in different areas of the city. So I have the list by council district. So to contact us, we're going to have a public hearing in your area. This is what we're going to talk about. Here, like, please come to this. So I wouldn't be asking them, because it's not for me to ask them, what do you guys think about this? It's for you guys to sort of hear from them.
Part of the reason I asked though is more like, for example, if there are organizations that work with, with the Latinx community, right, and they're hoping for content or materials in Spanish. Is the expectation here that whatever announcements are sent out get translated by the organizations and they do their outreach completely on their own?
I have not thought through that far. So that's actually a really good idea as far as saving us money for interpretation and translation of materials. I do have, and I posted on Twitter, some basic notices. Charter Review Commission meets at this day and time at this Zoom address in the different languages. As we branch out, like when you guys kind of form your decision, like this is the direction we think we want to go, and we start having the bigger public hearings for people to go over your proposal, we'll have more translation of documents, we'll have more interpretation at that point as well.
Sure, and actually clarify my point too. Coming from a background where I do work a lot with smaller CPOs, generally speaking, putting more things on their plate to do for free is not the best idea. So,
I'm not necessarily saying I'm going to ask them to do that, but I'm like,
okay.
If they do a quick 1-sentence blurb as they send it out to whoever they want to contact, that says like, here's the information of the date and time that this meeting is going to happen. But it's more, the interpretation and translation is going to come more as you get further into this process.
Okay. I know that you all kind of really put out an estimate of about, I think it was $400,000 to kind of do the outreach.
If we were to do everything, yeah.
Okay.
That's not, when we do it targeted the way I do for city council, because city council, we don't translate everything, we don't interpret everything, we do key items or key dates. I gave you guys, like, if we wanted to do everything, this is how much it's going to cost. the cost becomes, smaller as we do the more targeted.
Okay. I mean, we did get a letter from Sacred Heart, with a very generous offer to help and support the outreach here at no charge. I mean, that's definitely a great opportunity.
Right.
But I mean, I'm hoping though that we can actually get some support here for other organizations that may not be in may not be in a position to offer, the support of doing outreach completely for free.
Right. Okay, Commissioner Zhao.
I have a question as I'm trying to absorb all the information that I got tonight. So other than the San Jose mayor can run the meetings and propose the budget, what are the powers that the mayor has and the council they don't? And someone just mentioned that as long as the mayor gets 5 other votes together with him, then he can get something passed. So any council, if she or he can get 5 other people agree with him or her, and then can the same thing happen? That's my question.
Yes. All it takes is 6 votes.
Okay, so assumingly, the council, the power of the council and the mayor don't have much difference. Can I say so?
Well, and this is where there's a sort of I think a agreement around the form, how much of a hybrid of a council manager form is. The difference is I've heard, and I appreciate your comments and also some of the commissioner comments from other commissioners about, and actually the public, about cleaning up that the cheat sheet, the governance chart. And our intention here is to continue to clean that up so that it provides handy reference for you all. And I think that we can break out the specific powers of the mayor versus council. But I think the big, there's a difference between what the charter says can happen and how it happens in practice. The charter does say that the mayor can propose a city manager for evaluation and selection by the council. So the mayor does start that process, at least by writ of the law. The political or cultural practice is a little bit different, from what I've heard from Commissioner Lazat and others tonight. The big difference we also heard tonight that's not reflected in the chart is that the mayor has their own budget office that proposes the budget for council's consideration, and that this actually does have implications on policy implementation. But the mayor is, and then the mayor is elected separately at large compared to by districts. So there's a different election mechanism. But the mayor is part of the council. The mayor votes with council, and the mayor has no veto in San Jose. So some people might say that's what makes San Jose much more council manager, but an enhanced council manager where the mayor has a few more powers. I would say what I'd like to do is take your input and revise at least the chart, and take another pass on making sure that you all have something that is reflective of the conversations we've had tonight, the input we've heard, and is clear for you all. And I do really want to make sure that everyone has the same understanding, because I know that there's folks that have former council members on the commission, and then also folks that are not as savvy about the ins and outs of governance. So thank you, Commissioner Zhao, and I'll if it's okay with you, please let me update that chart and get back to you with another pass to make it as clear as possible.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I'm going to ask Lawrence, if you'll review the work schedule in terms of the changes that we've made in response to the commissioners, and then I'll take up any actions we want to take, because I think we've heard this part of the discussion. I want to move us to, is there actions or recommendations? And Lawrence, I really want to make sure that you consider Commissioner Fuentes's request early on in terms of the delineation of the roles more specifically.
Yep.
If it can fit into the chart, that's great, but if it needs to be separate, I think the clarity of people's roles and the closer we can get to reality in terms of what actually happens in San Jose would be really helpful.
Yeah, and I do think that there is an important kind of clarification here about, and where I've been operating from is to share with you exactly what the charter says. We also heard from Norberto tonight that it's very possible that the mayor and the council are not using all the powers that are available to them. So it is, I think, an important understanding for this commission about what the charter says can happen and what happens in practice, because you can't control what happens in practice. You can't even make recommendations about what happens in practice, really. You can make recommendations about what the charter says, or maybe a commission to make sure that something happens in practice. But the cultural and political aspects of governance, from my understanding, at least the place I've been coming from and providing you materials, is not the focus. The focus is, what is the structure of government writ in the laws of San Jose, i.e. the city charter. So that's where I'm coming from, and how it gets interpreted. Very much appreciate the experience of commissioners to talk about that in practice and what we heard tonight from our guest speakers. But just FYI on that piece, as far as my what I'm bringing to you. I want to review the changes that I made to the work plan, given your last round of requests and the speakers have been able to book. Next week, we heard that we wanted to get the timing of elections moved up a little bit, and the role of and paired with the role of districts and how council members are elected, and the role of council members relative to a mayor with more consolidated power. So to speak to this, I've been talking to Terry Christensen, who's a professor emeritus at San Jose State University, a colleague actually of Commissioner Percival's, and he hasn't been available up to now, but he is available on the 19th, and so he should be able to speak to these specifics in San Jose and more broadly. So I think it's going to be a great opportunity to finally get into some of the specifics around the timing of elections, which we haven't heard too much about yet. On May 3rd, I've got a kind of bucket here of the power and accountability metrics and mechanisms for the various governance roles. To be honest, this is something that I'm still trying to find ways to present. But I've also added in a bullet here about the analysis of potential levers for influence on accountability, equity, and inclusion, potential policy recommendations for consideration. This is a list that I've been keeping based on some of the conversations you all, or some of the suggestions you all made last time. And this is also some research we started to do, but is a research that research project I'd like to share with our new intern. And we'll talk to Tony and them next week, hopefully on Monday or shortly thereafter, about that. This was also the first time that representatives from the Office of Racial Equity were available. So Stephanie Jane and Sabrina Parra Garcia will be joining us to talk about their work. And they also were interested in hearing from you all some of the questions that you have for them. So we'll talk about this as a more specific ask next time, but if you have specific questions that you have of the Office of Racial Equity, they're interested in making sure that they can gather those questions ahead of time to use the best time of their time with you. And then my intention is to start to bring in examples from comparative cities. The cities that I am focusing in on are San Diego, which was brought up tonight. San Diego did make the shift from council manager to council manager to mayor council about 10 years ago. So trying to track down someone that can speak to that, potentially a former mayor, but at the very least others in that community. Also want to talk to someone from Detroit and have made contact, thank you, to Commissioner Matsumura about that Charter Review Commission's recent efforts to focus quite a bit on equity, and they've brought a proposal at this point that's being reviewed by the state of Michigan as a next step. So hoping to have someone from that commission speak. And then Austin has also developed a racial equity assessment tool, or racial equity tool, and is also undergoing a charter review. So that was some of the documents I shared with you. They're on the list of cities to look to. And then it was suggested that Kansas City could be a potential city for us to look at as what Professor Nelson had called a true hybrid, where it's kind of right smack in the middle between a council manager and a mayor council. So between May 3rd and then on May 17th, hoping to bring in some of those examples and speakers to talk to those. You know, I will note that as we get towards middle of May, we do have a break. We've talked about doing a public hearing sometime between May 17th and June 14th, but we do want to start to get into discussion. So there is kind of a sense, at least on my part, and I think that the chair agrees, to move us from study session, and not to say that we can't continue to have speakers and research, but to really start to provide the space for the commission to have discussion about what some potential policy recommendations might be, and to start to hash those out a little bit. So we do have some of that discussion starting to happen in June and onwards. And I think one of the questions I would like to leave with you all, we had talked about potentially tonight doing a round robin to get thoughts. I think it was Commissioner Fuentes had said we hadn't really done a round robin to check in to see where commissioners were at. But I would like to start to hear from you all. What are your thoughts about some, even just ideas that policy recommendations you might like to consider? We heard about some more tonight, emergency powers, you know, electing a city manager, whatever they might be, so that we can better inform the design of the discussion phase, or phase 2 of your work. So that's where we're at. Questions from commissioners about that, or thoughts about where we're at? And let's see. I'm going to start with Commissioner Calendar, since we haven't heard from you yet tonight, and then we'll get to Commissioners Fuentes, Monley, and Tran.
Yeah, so Mr. Lawrence, I think you went directly where I was wanting to go, because what I was hoping to do is be able to move us forward. Now, obviously, we're in April here. We've spent 4 months in a very strong study phase. However, I've yet to see any kind of proposal for us to react to or to respond to. So I'm trying to figure out, how do we start taking the next step into proposal phases? What is the expectation? Was it for commissioners to drive this by way of memo? So we someone throws out a memo and saying, I would think that we should go on this way, so we could have something to respond to. Because right now, you know, I just feel like I have an ambiguous ball of, okay, where are we headed and what am I responding to? And I'd like to be able to use at least the time we have remaining, responding to things, so either voting them up or voting them down, or figure out if we're going right or left. So that is where I'm hoping to start to drive. And I'm hoping we can potentially start doing it in the next few meetings, if not the even next meeting. So it's more of a comment versus anything needing a response. But I'd love to hear from the other commissioners behind me.
Sure, and just really quick response. I'm feeling the same, and our intention was tonight actually to really go around with commissioners, and I'm still open to doing that if commissioners are willing to go past time. There are other sort of matters at hand, as far as you know, the budget and additional support that, in addition to the guest speakers, that take time. Time is precious and limited. I think generally the approach I'm thinking about is, again, track the policy recommendations that are coming up, but really start to look to you to see if there's any specific thoughts or ideas that you'd like to start to discuss. I have a short list of ideas I've heard, and if it would be helpful, I'd be happy to share that as a very informal kind of rough list to start some brainstorming or get some ideas going. Again, just that I've been keeping from conversation, but I think my general approach here is to ask commissioners to share their thoughts on specific policy recommendations to lead us into discussion. And that could happen. I've been hoping that that would actually happen as a part of our conversations with guest speakers, and it hasn't started to come up yet. So I'm glad that you're bringing it up. And I as much as possible, I think the more specific we can get. The challenge is that there is a pretty big disparity on the education or understanding of the levers of governance right now. And so I think that we are, as a facilitator, I am trying to make sure that all the commissioners at least have had the opportunity to hear and understand the baseline of the current system of governance in San Jose, so that when we get into discussion, people aren't left asking, commissioners aren't left asking, well, how does that work in the first place? And so that there is an equal playing field for that discussion. Anyway, let's move on. Commissioner Monley.
I just want to comment on how refreshing and how informative our two guests were this evening, each speaking from the perspective of the role that they played. Ron Gonzalez speaking from a role that is elected and clearly political behind his comments, and City Manager Norberto Dueñas speaking from the perspective of an executive officer, as a hired executive officer. I got so much from those two this evening that it makes up for a whole lot of other that we haven't gotten. And I would love to see that kind of continue as we go forward. They were great.
Fantastic, thank you. Commissioner Posadas.
Yes, I have a request and a question that's probably best suited for our next meeting in 2 weeks when we talk about the role of districts. It seems like we've been very focused on the dynamics between the mayor and the city manager, with exclusion to the city council members, who are that third branch of our city government. And so I'd like to have a further discussion on that in 2 weeks. But the specific question I would have would be, how are the total number of districts determined in the city of San Jose? Is there a size of the city council that would work better for our size of the city with over 1 million residents? Because right now, if you do the simple division, it's about approximately 100,000 people per council district. But is that a magic number, or could it be any other number other than what it currently is? So that would be the question and discussion I hope to have at our next meeting.
Commissioner Posadas, I would ask, only to be clear, remembering that we have a redistricting commission that's looking specifically at those questions. So I've tended to not bring those questions here. And the professor did address the issue specifically on the number of residents in terms of the research and what that says. So I want to make sure that we aren't duplicating the work of our fellow commission. So we can answer the question in some ways very directly to the question you're asking and bring back the research evidence around it. But I also don't want us to go too far into the redistricting questions, because that's what another commission is working on. I will be meeting with the chair, Chair Alvarado, from that commission to look at, is there anything that her commission wants to make sure we're doing, or we want to make sure they're doing, and also how she's doing community engagement as well as how we're doing community engagement. So we might be able to get better synergies between the two commissions. I think I have a meeting scheduled with her for next week. So I'll definitely report back, Commissioner Posadas, on my meeting and specifically to answer your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, because there definitely is overlap between our two commissions.
Yeah, thank you for that question, for that comment.
All right, thank you. Vice Mayor Johnson.
So I have a few questions. So one, I wanted to ask Tony if she's planning to engage with that community org list that the commissioners have provided her with, or is she just planning to send announcements to that? And my other idea is, would it be possible for us to form subcommittees? It feels like, I personally am feeling very overwhelmed with all the information that I've learned in the past few weeks. And I was wondering if we could somehow form subcommittees to talk more about this, given the time constraints that we're working with to have this report.
So I have a question too. I want to make sure that when Tony answers the question, Tony, you're getting the lists from the councils who's just on their mailing list. So it could be an individual, it could be an organization, but it's anyone that's on the newsletter list for individual council members. So
I specifically requested the organization.
okay, so you have
Organizations.
organizations that that might be on their individual council newsletter lists.
Yeah, and it's not just their newsletter lists. A lot of them are maintaining a list of community organizations within their district.
Great.
So it's not pulling necessarily from just a giant mailing list. It's a specific separate list that probably is also in there.
Thanks very much. I would just thank you, for, Vice Chair Johnson, for letting me come into your question. So on your second question's response.
She was asking about the possibility of forming committees. Do you want to speak to that, Chair Ferrer? And you're muted.
Thank you, Vice Chair Johnson, for that idea. I think we're almost ready, but I'm starting to sketch some notes around that. I think that the time is kind of there, especially as we start to move towards the recommendation pieces, because there's going to be some of these things that we have to reconcile, kind of what should we bring back before the commission. So I'm willing to start looking at that fairly soon, and I'll be calling you, Vice Chair Johnson, to help me to kind of be able to organize that and feel like we have to how we're going to facilitate that. I also want to get clarity on the Brown Act in terms of what the subcommittee's rules are. I think that we're going to be, as I understand the rules around the Brown Act, that we should have some ability to do subcommittees without any real challenges to the Brown Act, and then bring back all our recommendations for Brown Act full commission meetings. But I just want to make sure we have clarity before we design the committees themselves, but I do think I'm kind of ready for that. I too am really excited about moving towards recommendations, folks. I am not in any way going to hold you back. And I just want to make sure that I'm trying to be also sensitive to the requests you've made. So you've asked for the Office of, Racial Equity. You've asked for the district discussion to come up. You've asked for a number of these things that we've put in place for the next couple of weeks. So I'm trying with our consultants to make sure that we're responsive to the commission's requests, but I'm ready to go to recommendations, and we will outline that kind of process of how we want to do that, especially when it comes to the 4 specific items. But tonight's presentation, for example, the review of all of the different parts of the commission came from your request. We have a running list of everyone's requests, and so we're kind of checking off that list. So just to make sure that you recognize that we are trying to be responsive to the commission's directions, and time is precious and we're moving as quickly as we can. Tonight, I did lighten the agenda to have only one kind of major piece and presentation, and you could see how much more questions and how much more discussion we were allowed to be able to do without having to rush into a second item and then this discussion around work plan. So time is challenging, and we're trying to be responsive.
Okay, I've got Commissioners Fuentes, Marshman, and Matsumura.
So I'm just going to repeat what I said earlier or requested earlier. And actually, I would like to know if this can be done, because if it's not possible to have either an intern or volunteer do it pretty quickly, I volunteer to do it myself if I can get a document that has a city charter that I can edit and organize. Because my request again is that we have one document that has the powers, responsibilities, and duties of the mayor, of the the city manager and the city council side by side so that we can really understand who has the authority to do what and the responsibility. Because I feel that, I mean, I would love the idea of starting to come up with recommendations, but I, for one, don't have enough knowledge of who has what authority right now. I don't care what the label is, what type of government, strong mayor, or whatever. That's not what's important. Is really what's going on right now. And also, in addition, especially, I mean, I agree, we had great speakers today, especially after what the city manager shared with us in terms of really what powers is everybody using. And also, especially because of Commissioner Posadas, what you brought up in terms of what is going on with the city council. Because though I understand that there is a commission that's redrawing the lines, I'm not sure if they're going to be looking at other things, but a city council member district lines, I'm not sure what else they are doing, but we may be the ones to have to look at that question eventually. So in any case, my question is, my question earlier was I was interested in what other commissioners thought about this idea, if they also felt the same need. But I'm thinking, even if no one else needs it and we can't get this information quickly, then I will do it. What we got tonight in terms of the duties and that table, I mean, that's helpful. But what I really need is something that has the actual text from the charter and says, quote, this is what the mayor does in terms of hiring the city manager or whatever. But we actually have the text from the charter that we can use as a tool to know what's written in there. And then from that, we will be, of course, talking about changes and making recommendations. But anyway, that's my comment. And
Mr. Fuentes, I'm going to ask that we wait to respond to you until we've actually met with our graduate student intern,
okay.
if that's a possibility. And if it's not, I'm going to take you up on your offer and ask you to help us with a volunteer, or at least work with a grad student to be able to do that. So we should be able to get back to you this week after meeting with the grad student.
Great. And I am happy to do the work, you know, just know that.
Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Marshman.
Thank you. I agree. Our guests tonight were really good. And Norberto, it kind of surprised me when he said maybe it is time to look at some changes, but he said something that I think would be useful for us to clearly identify the problems you want to overcome before we start looking at serious changes. And for instance, for the strong mayor, we know that some mayors can't get the 6 votes and would like to fire a city manager once in a while, but there has to be more to it than just being able to fire a few people or hire individually a few people. And we haven't gotten any of that or any pluses of changing that formula in any way. And even on equity, I mean, I can think of lots of things in the city that have not been equitable, and I think it's great to look at policy, ways to change policies to improve the situation. But clearly, a lot of you have done a lot of work on this, and I would love to see more specifics on exactly what you mean by equity and what you think should be done. Maybe that's something we wait for actual proposals or talk about it in a committee, but I would really like more specifics on both of those things. Thank you.
Commissioner Matsumura.
Thank you. Regarding the work plan and sort of this theme of recommendations, one proposal I want to put out there is that in advance of the public hearing, we actually take a moment to put together some thoughts from the commission on this exact question of what are the policy areas that we would like to undertake under that third bucket, so that there's a concrete proposal there from the commission that the public can then respond to. Not having had a public hearing yet, maybe we'll get it completely wrong. But then, you know, hopefully we will be doing, with this much advance notice, we'll be doing incredibly robust outreach for that public hearing. Hopefully by then we will have gotten the budget to support robust outreach for that public hearing so that they can come in and help us get it right. So that was one piece I wanted to put out there on the work plan. The other piece is just to name, and I know that Chair Ferrer and Lawrence, you've said this before, but you know, I appreciate that the work plan continues to be in progress. I think not to get groans from my colleagues, I think we're probably going to need more time than this at the end to really work through some of the nuance and the challenging policy issues that we're starting to discuss, and I hope we'll be taking up. So I just want to never lose sight of the fact that this work plan currently ends a little less than 2 months before the required end of the commission, and if we need to take that additional time to do a good job, we should. I wanted to touch base on the budget item. First, I got a tiny bit more information after I submitted the memo. I was trying to get as much information as I could to be able to pass it along to colleagues here, which is that for the Detroit information, those staff positions were 1.0 FTEs. I wasn't previously sure about that. And as I noted, they had previously had a higher budget, had to go through some cuts, and then they're, from what I understand, they're increasing their budget again right now as they kind of go into the final phase of the work of their commission and need to have adequate resources for very robust outreach before it gets on the ballot. On the front of the budget, I know that this, from my understanding, and thank you to the clerk for helping me understand this, I believe this is going to be on the Rules Committee agenda on Wednesday. And please correct me if I'm reporting wrong what you shared with me via email, that the Rules Committee is going to have the option to send our request to staff or to the council, or presumably to just file it with no action. I wanted to ask the chair as well as our staff, how are we preparing for that? Are we going to be representing, speaking, testifying at the Rules Committee? Are we making any recommendation as far as whether this comes back to staff or council? And Mr. Chair, you had talked about starting some work on the budget. What's our plan to be fully prepared for if and when this goes to City Council?
As for presentations, you guys, all of you are welcome to attend the Rules and Open Government Committee and to raise your hand when we get to the public record and speak for 2 minutes on that item. Generally, I have to be like this. It's your guys' words. I put it out there. I don't advocate one way or the other. I just kind of do what I'm told. If the council directs me to do it, I do it. When it goes to council, I'll have a response at that point. But at this stage, it's the words coming from you. And so if you guys want to come speak to it at the meeting, you're all welcome to. And we can send you the direct link so you don't have to go on the website and go looking for it.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, we are, lost my stack here. Commissioner Posadas.
Yes, I just wanted to agree with Commissioner Fuentes that the comparison sheet would be very helpful, not just to us, but really to the community when we begin our outreach process, and having them see something that's very straightforward in a single document, hopefully will help them understand the things that we're asking of them and the way that they can help us in return. That's all.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Tran, and then Commissioner, actually, let's go to Commissioner Sanchez because we have yet to hear from you.
Yeah, I just want to thank all the speakers tonight, Lawrence, for all the information they've given. I came to this commission a little bit later on. I replaced a commissioner who left. And so anyway, I've been trying to catch up on things. But again, all that information has been very, very helpful to me. And I think ultimately, what is the end result of this commission? I think we have to take a look at that in terms of what really do we want to accomplish, you know? And one of the things that I like to take a look at is having our citizens of San Jose have a better understanding of the governance structure that we have in this great city. And I think if you walk down the block and ask 100 people who the city manager was, I doubt you'll find one person who could tell you who the city manager is of San Jose. But maybe that's something we need to take a look at too, in terms of educating our constituents out there in that respect. But I think ultimately, it's been these past few meetings have been very helpful to me as we move forward. And I do want to echo many of the comments made, and especially from Maria Fuentes, because they've been very helpful. But again, definitely would like to take a look at some action plans that we want to work on in the next few meetings that we'll have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Commissioners Tran and Siegel, and then we'll move on to public comment.
Sure. One request and one question to Lawrence. For our next meeting, would you actually be able to get a summary of what the mayor's emergency powers are? A lot of this, I think this whole conversation started off in the context of what the mayor can do when we have situations we need to address. And so I think I'd be interested in seeing that. Second thing is I actually want to commend Commissioner Matsumura for her research on the Portland budget and and how the Detroit Charter Review Commission's work. I actually think that is very enlightening for what can happen if we actually do get proper resources. So to the chair, are we able to? I'm actually want to get some follow up here. I'm wondering, Tony just said that her job is just to basically forward whatever we put out there to the Rules Committee. In your work, are you able to incorporate some of this information or incorporate all of it? Since, this is the only data that we have currently so far as we communicate with the City Council.
Yeah, so I plan to be at the Rules Committee to testify, to represent us, and to also, I will be using and quoting Commissioner Matsumura's examples of other cities and what they've done in terms of their role and their advocacy, and be able to answer any questions the council may have, or the Rules Committee members may have, in terms of why, whatever. And I wanted to be prepared around what the city's, what I don't want to hear is, well, the city, we're well staffed and the city can just take care of it. That's why I wanted to make sure we knew what is the capacity of the city, and what kinds of things do the commission thinks that they need still to be done, that maybe the city staff, which has expertise and can help us in some ways, may not be able to help us in others. I think your questions around outside counsel is a good example of where outside counsel might be compromised, most likely wouldn't be, but is outside counsel ready to, would outside counsel be able to help us in some of the creation of recommendations that internal counsel may not? So there's a lot of those pieces that I would raise in terms of representing us at the Rules Committee, and at least that was my plan.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Great, and we'll do, Commissioner Tran, happy to pull that info for you. Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you, Lawrence. I was hoping you could get us a chart of proposed changes to the charter and the pros and cons, and that this could be a working document as we go forward. Lots of ideas have come up, and if we could just start that chart now, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, happy to do that. And for me, that's I'm a little hesitant because these are not necessarily fully formed ideas. They're more seeds of an idea that I've just been tracking and pulling out for this very reason. But I'm happy to share that as a list with a very big caveat that these are basically pull quotes from our conversations and guest speakers to help. And on that note, I would request, as we've heard from a few of you, your help in starting to generate these ideas. I think the use of memos by some of you has been helpful to seed information. If you want to put something in memo ahead of time, please do. What I would request is that if there's any ideas that have come up that are of interest to you, I would like to make time next time we meet to do a round robin to just hear what they are, and as time allows to start to either get a pulse from you all about whether these ideas seem interesting, feasible, viable, or even discuss them. But just starting to populate that universe of potential policy recommendations, or excuse me, I keep saying policy, but charter revision recommendations. I'm sensing with all of you that we're at that point. So really requesting your active participation in drawing up that list, and I will make a promise to you to capture those ideas and make space for that discussion as we move forward. So with that, I'll pass it back to the chair.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thanks to everybody. Let's move to public comment on this item. Is there speakers, Madam Clerk?
The first one is Roland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first of all, I'd like to echo your earlier comment about the format of this meeting tonight and how productive it was. The first thing I'd like to do is how to engage the various ethnic groups in the city. And I would like to start out with a citywide problem with Zoom, whereby the city is not enabling the closed captioning feature in Zoom. That's problem number one. But moving on to the ethnic groups, the solution, it may already be there, but it's a partnership between Google and Zoom, which should translate the closed captioning in real time in whatever language it is people want to do. That would take care of the problem, not just for this commission, but across the entire city on every item. With regards to bandwidth and internet issues, I can see that Commissioner Matsumura is using the audio feature at the bottom left of your screen, which allows you to switch your audio to phone, and that's going to take care of your internet issues in case you have a freeze. But in closing, what I want to part with you is the earlier comment I made, and I really appreciate all of you that followed up with it, is what happened when Ed Shikada was fired. It's very simple. If you go to Google and you Google Ricardo fired Ed Shikada, Shikada, you will get 2,000 hits. And the clearest article that explains to you what happened is actually a quote directly from Mayor Ricardo, which says, Ed was informed of my desire to start a search for a city manager. That's a San Jose Insight article on January 8, 2015. I don't know whether Section 1604 was involved. I'm pretty sure that there never was any council vote on this, but the problem was, the bottom line is that Mr. Shikada was fired. You can subpoena him. You can subpoena the mayor. I'm sure Norberto knows it.
Thank you, Roland. Next speaker.
Sorry, Matt King.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to follow up on the correspondence I asked to be shared with all of you about community engagement and how to do it and how to do it well. This is a topic that's come up a few times that was invited into this space several meetings ago. And I'm not hearing any commitment to actually follow through in doing it in a real extensive way. Just sending alerts to have people, hey, come to these meetings does not even begin to qualify as real community engagement. So I provided some insight from our experience and the experience of other folks we work with. Again, I think it's really important that community members are brought in to help shape proposals around the charter and to have the opportunity to share their ideas of like what they would like to see happen with the charter, and not just have some report given to them with like, here's what we came up with, hope you like it, which is what I've heard mentioned so far. And when you pay the organization then becomes responsibility for providing interpretation, right? That's part of why you pay them, so they can pay for the interpretation. And it's also important to pay community members, not just organizations. Like if you want to get people's time and input, then they should be paid as well. I gave you, a partial list of some works, and I've actually added to it since I wrote that. There's plenty to choose from. And I just really beseech you to take outreach very seriously and do it in a way that is going to be meaningful, and pay people for their time and expertise to do this right, and do it sooner rather than later, and then go back to people again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Next speaker.
Blair Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. I'm kind of in a mellow space again, so thank you. Thank you for the words of the previous speaker, Matt King. I was impressed with his letter and his process. I tried to offer my words from his words last week that, we're building what is very possibly a real future of a more public engagement in the democratic process of a community. It's an awesome concept. It is really how to build the ideas of not just equity, but sustainability, long-term sustainability, I feel. I mean, it is practicing good democratic practices. That's an important concept. And so I think ideas of the mayor having a strong mayor system of a direct channel to developers and the like, I think that may be falling by the wayside a bit. I think as a group, you are starting to talk about, the city manager council system more. And that's interesting. Interesting to understand that Councilperson Esparza, back in July last year, was talking about this process as a council community process, not a council city manager process. We're all trying to understand how even the mayor can have a bit more power than the city manager. I think that should be the efforts we work on, and not concentrate on having the mayor have as direct power to engage developers. We're going past that. That's the community involvement. That's people involvement. Learn to practice what Matt King says as offering, and we develop even more open dialogue about our community experience. And good luck how we do that. Thanks for all your work and efforts. I'll be glad to see Sabrina Perrar in the next few weeks. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Beekman. Next speaker, please.
Robert Brownstein.
Sorry to speak again, and it's late, but I'd like Commissioner Fuentes to be able to get the information she wants. And for that to happen, it's got to be a document that shows both the text and the practice. They can't be treated separately. They're very much related. The text both allows and induces certain kinds of practices. And that's why you've got this situation where a speaker earlier said Mayor Liccardo fired Ed Chicada. Well, Mayor Liccardo by himself didn't fire Ed Chicada, but because the practice of the mayor having a governing coalition is so strong in San Jose, it had the appearance as if the mayor simply unilaterally fired the city manager. And that kind of document hasn't been put together yet. In fact, the reality of the practice hasn't even been clearly stated in many areas. The mayor doesn't produce the recommended budget in San Jose based on the previous charter. The mayor produces a budget message. The city manager produces the recommended budget. There are two budget offices in San Jose, one in the city manager's shop and one in the mayor's shop. And I think Maria Fuentes is right in really wanting to get clarity on this so that everybody knows where we're starting from. And to do that, we're going to not just need to have the text, but also what the practical reality is. And I don't know any way to do that other than talk to the people who do this stuff. Linda knows some of it, knows all of it if she'd put the time in. But that's what's going to have to happen. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's just that's my question. How do we do that? And who's the ultimate decider on what the practice is? So very open to other recommendations about how to make that happen for sure.
Next speaker, please.
Alina?
Hi, Commissioners. Alina here. So I just want to build on what Matt King had shared in his letter and his comment. A lot has changed in the realm of public meeting access and local governance that really opens up community engagement in a way that has never happened before. And I think how we define the process and legislate the moment to set a new precedent on how we engage with the community that is equitable and inclusive is now in this commission. And I hope that for those of you who are able, that you also speak at the open rules meeting, that your agenda item for funding and resources needed in order to do the job that you were tasked to do by council. They can't ask you to do all these things and provide you no money to do it. I don't think that is fair, and I don't think that is equitable or inclusive. And so I really hope that some of you will also be able to go speak on that, and that all of you continue to advocate for the community as you have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Alina. Next speaker.
That was the final speaker.
Awesome. Thank you. Now we go to our public comment. This is the open forum in which anybody from the public that wants to address the commission on an item that was within the purview of this commission, on an item that's not on our agenda tonight. Are there speakers that want to address the commission?
Blair Beekman.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you. For my first words of public comment tonight, the ideas, really idealistic, good things we learn to practice now that can prepare us for the future of natural disasters and wars, pandemics, all the bad stuff. If we do the really good work now, we can be better prepared when those bad things happen. And so good luck in our efforts. I feel that you are starting to realize that changes are about the community efforts, and that's an interesting concept. Thank you for that, and I hope we continue in that direction. I have a quick comment that you may want to do old business at the end of a meeting. When you offer the consent calendar approval at the beginning of the meeting, can you allow public comment at that time? When you approve the previous minutes. That, I feel, would give the public a way to kind of remind ourselves of what we talked about in the previous meeting, and that sets kind of a standard of what we can then talk about in the new items of the agenda. It's an important component of public comment who are not privy to the same conversations you guys are during the month. So it's an important concept. I hope you can allow public comment at the minutes approval at the beginning of each meeting. I guess that's about it for myself. Thank you for all your work and efforts, and go democracy, good community democracy. That's the goal here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Next speaker.
That was the final speaker.
Awesome. That closes the public comment on the open forum. We are adjourned and scheduled to meet in 2 weeks, week after next. Thank you to all commissioners for your efforts tonight, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks.